guess I left that up. I guess that's something Damon had left up from the last show. Sorry about that. Took me a while to figure out how in the hell to move that. So anyway, here we go. I guess this is better. Everything's going all right. What's going on? Clitoris? Looks like clitoris. Oh, what's going on, brother? What's up, Guppy? What's up, nice brothers? Curtis? What's going on, everybody? Hope everybody's having a good weekend. Or what you eat? I just noticed that. I was like, man, I had a little bit of a nap and I just woke up. My eyes are still clearing up, and a little bit cloudy. I had to put some drops in there. My contacts are drying up. And that's when I saw his name. That's the first time I really realized it looked like clitoris. Didn't see that in quite so well. What? That's funny. What's going on, brother? Hope everybody's having a good weekend. Still didn't get my apple mash started or washed, whatever it's washed. Get that started. What's going on, Dark? What's going on, David? From BC, Canada. Nice. Beautiful place up there, man. That survivalist TV show Lost, don't they film up around those parts, man. It's a beautiful country up there. Had a friend of mine that lived, well, I was going to say, used to have a friend of mine that lived up there. I guess he still lives up there. But yeah, beautiful place. Oh, I'm fine. No, I just woke up and I had me a little nap. Man, I tell you, I ate dinner and sit and on the couch next to Ann eating and then watching. I guess right now we're watching Survivor. Left, not a repeat, but we record it and watch it. Or we don't record it. I guess we watched on Paramount, but it played earlier this week. We used to have to record it, but sitting there watching that, just doze right off. It was like a big old hog, man. I eat and I just want to go to sleep. So had a big old nap and just snuggled up there, and a few minutes ago, so, honey, it's 8 o'clock. Oh my God, you're gonna be running upstairs. I got to piss, got to get something to drink, and come back down. My eyes are dried up. I can hardly see anything. I wear contacts, and so I'm having to put these drops in my eyes. And when I did that, the damn lid falls off and rolls out. Of course, it couldn't just fall on the floor. It's got to roll under the desk, and not just under the desk. It's got to roll to the back underneath the desk. So I'm on my damn hands and knees, trying to hurry and get some drops in my eyes, and I was a mess. It was a mess. I'm from Kentucky. Anyway, hello, Hambone. What's up, brother? Yeah, it is about time for a sip for sure. Hey, Jackie, how are you? Yeah, I'm from from Eastern Kentucky, Pike County. That's about as moonshine capital as you can get. Yes. Oh, yeah, it is. Good time for a sip. I'll take a little sip of that tequila, and I'll sip on the last of that Bloody Butcher sour mash. All right, good question. Kevin. All right, Kevin, as far as temperature wise, are we talking about the pot or are we talking about the coolant? Because really, the coolant is what I pay most attention to. And best keep that coolant from about 65 to 75 in that range, 60 to 75. Uh, so that will definitely, get about the best coolant temp. But if you're talking about pot temps, I don't look so much at the temperature as I do at the drip, right? So, but there it depends on your burner. I mean, you can crank it up too much. There's some of these burners are like 300,000 BTUs, and certain pots are real thin. Thin stainless these days, or real thin copper even. So, I guess if you crank one of those up too much, you can kind of, scorch, uh, some things. If you got some residual powders in there or something, you probably heat it up maybe a little bit too much. You might have some kind of fall to the bottom, and kind of scorch. But generally speaking, most people look at the pot temps in the 190s. When you're going to run, I've got a pretty good little graph here I can show you. Let me get back to my pictures. Here we go. I don't know why, but every time I sleep, I get congested. Damn sure ain't allergic to sleep though. Let's see. Here we go, and I will hit that button so we can watch some comments. But before I do, I want to show this. So it really depends on what your percentage is, or your proof of your mash or must or wash, to what temperature is going to start boiling off alcohol, right? So if you got like a 20 proof or a 10% mash, that's going to happen at about around 197 degrees. If you've like got some tails in there and you're up to about 50 proof or about 25%, you're going to be about right here. And that's going to be about 187, 186 or 7. So that's about the the temp that you're going to start seeing some things happening, some alcohol, evaporate off. But this is basically a boiling point. This is a floating boiling point. And you can see it goes all the way up to the boiling point of water, all the way down to the boiling point of pure ethanol. And once you mix the two, because they're azeotropic, it changes the boiling point proportionately to the amount of alcohol or water that you have in it. More water raises the boiling point, more alcohol lowers the boiling point. Around 208 is probably be a place to stop, Jim. Because that's going to cook off pretty much all the alcohol till you get down to just a couple, about 5, maybe 10 proof. And that's about as far as I go into the sweet waters, when I'm running off my tail. So that's about, running at about 208 and letting it do its thing till pretty much nothing's coming out anymore, because that's pretty much going to mean most of the rest is going to be water. Yeah, we preach running low and slow, and we do that because people tend to get in a hurry, and especially beginners, when they first get it, just crank it up, let's get through this, and the longer it takes, the higher they want to keep cranking it up and turning it up, and it's easy, especially with a lot of these vevers, to overdo them, and create too much pressure in there in the pot, because like we were talking about last week, you got for example, a 13-gallon pot, and you got a 3/8 inch little line coming out of it. There's a lot of pressure going to build up, and there's a lot of vapor velocity going through that pipe to get rid of all that vapor too. That's cooking off that larger pot with that small pipe coming out of it, right? Hello, Miss Lisa. And so, as your pressure increases, what does the temperature do? It wants to shoot up as well. So what happens is you get too much heat in there and you get a lot of water coming off with it, which it sometimes it's not a bad thing to have some water come off, because you come off at like 130, 40 proof, and you can get some good flavors out of it because of the water. But at the same time, you don't want to force the pressure up to where it's coming off more water, because also it's going to be really difficult to make your cuts, because it's going to kind of smear and blend when you got everything trying to cook off at once. So the slower, lower and slower you go up to a point, you don't fractionally distill, but it's easier to make your cuts. Whereas if you just crank it up and it goes too far too fast. Now, the stills with like the spools, 1.5 inch, 2 inch stainless spools, it's hard to get, too much, pressure behind one of those, because it's easy for it to force all that steam out of your pot. Like I got an 18.5, and it forces it through a 2 inch pipe. Well, that's not a lot of, pressure building up inside that pot, with that much, pipe to force it through. But imagine if you reduce that fractionally to like a 1/2 inch, or a 3/8 inch line, you get a lot of pressure build up behind that. When you build that pressure up, the temperature shoots up, and then the pot temp shoots up, and you start just getting a lot of mix of everything coming out at once, and it's real tough to make good cuts. Yeah, get everything warmed up and stirred up. It's a good thing. A good point. It's a good thing. A lot of people, when they're heating up, they don't stir. When you get it to the point where you can heat it up and stir it and get it going good, and then put your camp on, clamp it, and then put your, attach a couple of things, or just put your column on there. The columns come pretty much pre-assembled, the whole thing, and you got your water line attached to it and everything, so it's easy just to sit on the top, put that tri clamp on there, and boom, and so it gives you a chance to stir that up, and then you put that lid on real quick. I mean, but back in the old days, when you had to put the cap on and let it in, it was hard to do that, because it took a while to get it mudded in, and you didn't want steam coming out while you're mudding and puttying it up, because it'd burn you. Steam pretty hot. Yeah, 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 sure thing. Yeah, it depends on the pot, and if you're running a pot still, which most of us are, the temperature's not going to be, it's a non-factor basically. You'll know by your burner if you're running it too hot, but heating it up till it boils, and then cutting it back and adjusting your to your drip or your stream, depending on your still size. Yeah, if you got a 5 gallon, probably about as fast as you can drip. 10 gallon, a little bit faster than the drip, but no more. And 20 is like, pencil lead stream. And, as the stills get larger, your stream coming off gets larger. And that's basically proportional, and that's why a lot of times, like, I was talking about last week, a 500-gallon still can run in 4 or 5, 6 hours, just like a 20-gallon still, you know, if you're running. But it low and slow, to a point. But I've had people in the past. It's been 10 hours. Should I be expecting something to happen? It's at 180. Ethanol boils at 173. It should be coming off there, but it's not. What's wrong? What did I do? Do I not have alcohol in there? And they just don't understand. That proof and ABV, you need to be 195, 200 to get some of that off there. You're not going to see much happening with that tip. So low and slow to a point, but definitely gotta get that temp up there. Yeah, and I'll put that back up there for you. It's because it's azeotropes. And also the issue is there's a lot of other azeotropes in there as well. But yeah, as a lot of people think, and I mean, I've seen it on Discovery Channel, and I'm not talking about moonshiners. I'm talking about some other stuff that they've done and specials, and I've seen it on, I think even Wiki and some of the other stuff. They think that when you're distilling alcohol at 173.1, you know, all that ethanol is just boiling right off that water. It's just coming right out of there miraculously, but it won't unless it's pure ethanol. But once you start mixing water with it, it raises that boiling point of the alcohol. And at the same time, it's lowering the boiling point of the water. And if you want to read about it, azeotropes, Azeotropes, azeotropes. They're pretty interesting. For sure. Yeah. Yeah. And you get all that pressure built up and that pressure shoots up in that pot and it's just like everything's coming off at once. You don't really get a good separation of heads and hearts and tails. It's just pretty much it makes all three cooking off at the same time. And it's just you can't fractionally distill in a pot, but you can go, low and slow and make it help make better cuts for sure. Yes, I sure can. There you go. What's going on, Kenny Parker? How you doing, brother? Good to see you on here. Did y'all have a pretty good hangover the other night? I saw you and Toby popping in and out. Yeah, looked like y'all had a good time, man. I was glad to see y'all out having fun. Oh yeah, before we get any further, where's my little notes at? Daggone if I didn't have a note and moved it. Oh, there it is. Oh yeah, Scott Robinson's grandmother's pray for her. I think this was yesterday. He was calling for prayer, so she's having a pretty tough time. So I'm not sure if her health has improved or not, and what's going on with that. I haven't heard any details yet, but just pray for him and his grandma. Scott, hope she's doing better, brother. My blackberry wash is just finished. Going to let it settle for a few days before you run it. Well, what does it taste like now, Scott? Have you tried a sippy sip of it? You got to taste some of that wine, man. You might want to bottle that shit instead of run it. Thank you, sir. Who drank all your beer? Well, might have happened last night. That didn't. The next question is, do you have teenagers? I don't know. I snuck into the wine. My dad, my neither one of my parents were much on drinking, but every once in a while they'd have some wine. So that was what I ended up getting to sneak out as wine and probably the worst damn liquor cabinet ever. They had like all mixers, triple sec and grenadine and all these mixers, but no good alcohol, man. I don't know. Maybe they did that for a reason. Maybe it's somewhere else. It's like, man, it's all mixers and no good stuff. Uh-oh. Maybe we found the culprit. Yeah, I've not been much a beer drinker myself, Dark. Even when I was young, I drink it, with my buddies when we went out to get drunk and stuff and or drink, you know, if I didn't want to get crazy, uh, and to have something to throw at the road signs as we drove out in the country and to and from the bootleggers. But most of the time I was drinking whiskey. It still is my favorite. Oh, you haven't opened it up yet? Yeah, I agree, Clint. I'd have to taste it. I always try it before I boil it off, because if it's a real good wine and Blackberry makes some fine wine, especially if you back sweeten it just a little bit, kill that yeast off, and sweeten it up a little bit. Or I didn't want to talk about this last week, but there is another way to kind of back sweeten without having to worry about the potassium sorbate and potassium metabisulfate killing your yeast off or neutralizes them, is to use that xylitol. But I've been talking with people about it. They some people, I guess, it adversely affects them, gives them the runs. So I don't know, or it hurts their stomach. I guess it gives them the runs. Yeah, I definitely let it settle a bit and drop me a little shot glass in there and skim me off a nice clean drink and see how it tastes. Probably, I don't know, might be a little bit carbonated, but if it's good taste, you can rack that off and let it settle again and rack it again and then degas it. What's going on, Kevin? Good question. How often does a still need to be clean, and do you just use a vinegar wash? If it really depends. If you're a commercial distiller, you don't clean stills that often. You're running continuously, and the next wash that goes in is cleaning out the last one. So a lot of times they'll just rinse out the middle. If they do that, drain it out. Next goes in, and that's it. Most just get a rinse, and then I think every 3 to 6 months, they may stop and get in there and scrub around a little bit and clean everything up. And then, I've heard some do it every 6 months, some annual cleaning, some, hell, from the looks of some of the horror stories I've seen, when Tim Smith would go around and try to help some of these distillers, when he did his show. And there was some, I mean, it was, of course, TV and stuff, but he'd legitimately go in and try to figure out what where they were going wrong and issues they were having. And there were some that never been cleaned, and they had wood, you know fermenters that had never been cleaned. There's black mold on some of them. It was bad. But yeah, but with copper, just make sure that you don't ever store anything in it. Don't leave your back set in there, because that acidic level, that back set's pretty acidic, and you leave it in that still even overnight, and it's going to start working on that copper. And next thing you know, it's going to turn it green, because all that oxidation and all that acid etches that outside, layer of copper, and makes it rough and gives it more surface area, and it starts to oxidize where it's just not polished anymore. And next thing you know, you got a bunch of green built up, and then you're going to have to run you some citric acid or vinegar or something in there to kind of, could get that, dissolved off there. And, might have to use a little scrubbing and stuff. But yeah, copper's a little more maintenance than stainless. Stainless, you just rinse and go. I do know that a lot of times when I do brandies in my pot, where it foams up there at the top, you got an inch or two gap. I leave that inch or two. So you're getting foaming going on. I mean, you can't heat up anything without it foaming, whether you realize not. Hell, just boiling water, boil some eggs, and look what happens. Just water itself will foam up like it's a damn beer. So sometimes when I do brandies and stuff, I'll get some sludge, and stuff built up from that, and that'll have to be scraped off and cleaned off pretty well. But yeah, you should just rinse them each time, and if just keep them running, keep them going. They won't eat it. What's going on, Jason? What's up, brother? Yeah, you're not a beer drinker either, Hambone. What's going on, Victor? How you doing, brother? That's Toby's dad, for y'all that don't know, our friend Toby. That's his dad. Hope you're doing well, Victor. Yeah, Toby's a good guy. Sure he is. He's got a big heart, man. Toby's a good old boy. I like him. I like to kid with him, man. And sometimes he gets mad at me when I kid with him. But if I didn't like him, I wouldn't tease him like that. I hope he knows that. Did you spirit run? Okay. Just did a spirit run on your first corn mash. Had to stop out halfway through it. That'll be fine. Yeah, sometimes that happens, and just pick right up. And now I will say that going through starting it back up again, you may have to take just not like the 50 milliliters per gallon or whatever, but you might have to take the first little bit that comes off again, because a lot of times that first bit comes off even after you taken most of your heads and fours out. There's always going to be some left in there, and every time you reheat, take that first little bit out. And it's not for safety factor, or anything like that, because there's definitely not going to be anything with enough concentration to hurt you or probably even give you a headache, but it will affect your flavor. So taste that first bit that comes off the next time, and you'll probably want to get a little bit off there before you start, adding to your hearts again. What's going on, Roy? Doing pretty good, brother. How about yourself? Hey, Jeff. Good to see you, brother. What's up? So, who all went to OBX? That's happening tonight, I guess, isn't it? Say hello to everybody down there at OBX. Should be a good time. How you been, Jeff? I ain't forgot about you, brother. I got you taken care of, though. Sitting there in a jar waiting on you, brother. Yeah. Sometimes on my stainless, like I say, I get that little boiling foamy stuff that leaves a little bit of, grudge. It's between, I guess, the liquid line and the lid. So a little bit where it foams up in there, it'll leave some I don't know, residuals, proteins and stuff that I have to clean off. But other than that, just spray it and run. Spray it, clean it out, and go. I do a batch, 20-gallon batch of rye with 40 pounds of grain. 1 to 40. No, that wouldn't be too much chocolate malt. No, no. And now, if you, there's no diastatic in that, and I know you know that, but no, I don't think that at all. I think 5%, or less is a pretty good number to stick to, or do less. And that's not even close. So yeah, you should be fine with a pound of 40. Actually, probably be pretty good. Um, you could go a little bit more. Let's see, 40 to 1. Let's see, 10 to 1. That would be 10%. So it's about 2.5%. So I think two would be 5%. So you should be fine. If you want a light flavor, if you want a stronger flavor, you could go up to two, but really get beyond two, get beyond 5%. Unless you really love that flavor, it can get pretty intense. Especially the darker that malt, the more intense it can get. Well, Miss big question is, how did what you got coming off there for your first time taste? What do you think about it? How did you get far enough? Did you get into your hearts, or did you just get started and have to stop? Yeah, I agree. But there is a point where it's just, even for a lover of malts, it just gets to be too much. Especially that dark malt, kind of like cinnamon. Even people that love cinnamon is not going to load down the thumper with 10 sticks or something. Are you just gonna, what's that fiery hot stuff that everybody drinks? Tastes like, I don't drink that stuff. I've never bought any of it. I've tried it a couple of times, but I'm trying to think the name of it. It's tastes like those red hots we used to eat as kids. I guess this does something else. I like it. It's not bad, but it's just not something I could sit and drink on a lot. But yeah, It's I 5 to 10%. I would never go over 10, with the dark malt, but 2.5. It's definitely not going to overdo it. So if you wanted to add to another pound to get about 5%, if you really enjoy that flavor, that'd be pretty good. Um, at about 1 to 40 pounds, it might be a little bit light. Definitely not going to be overpowering though, and that might be a good thing because you get too much of that malt and it can dominate. Grilling and chilling and drinking. That's good, brother. Had a little rain here today and it's getting cold, man. My grilling days are getting more narrow and narrow. Yeah, there's no diastatic on them, man. When they malt those, it's definitely just for flavor. That's awesome. Well, how was it tasting, brother? Fireball. Yeah, that's what it's called. I've never bought a bottle of it. I've drank a little bit, a time or two when we're at festivals and stuff, and everybody's passing stuff around. I know a lot of people make their own fireballs and stuff, and I've tasted some pretty spicy stuff out there, man. They get happy with that cinnamon. And I've also seen people make apple pie that put a few sticks in their thumper and think that it should be sufficient, and it just, man, it gets overpowering. So never put too much in those cinnamon sticks in your thumper, like with an apple pie or pumpkin pie or something like that. You're trying to spice up because it doesn't take much to where it just overwhelms everything. It becomes a dominant flavor, and you don't really, you just want a little bit of that in the background. You don't want fireball. Is it tasting sweet? That's awesome, brother. So that's congrats on the first run, man. You're hooked then. Because usually, sometimes people put a lot of work and money into it, and that first one comes out and they're disappointed. And it's like, well, damn, I did all this time and work and nothing. 5%. Yeah, it's a good, that's a good that's a good ratio. I think, Wayne, that's a pretty good ratio, I think too. If you like the malt flavor, 5 I think is a pretty good number. Um, I think 2.5 is going to be a light malt. It'll you'll have the notes of it and a good malt flavor. It won't be real strong. But at 5, 2.5 to 5. So I was, like saying, pound maybe if you wanted to add another pound, it wouldn't hurt. But I definitely, when you get past 10, it's, even people that like malt, they don't really like, it's like, okay, it's a little bit much. But I mean, there's some out there now that probably, do 30 or 40% malt, half malt or something, and just love it, and nobody else touch it. But that's why there's not just one bottle on the shelf. Everybody has different tastes. It's not chocolate rye. Pretty happy with how it's coming out. I was worried. Yeah, nah, you've not. That's the beauty of this is if you don't scorch it, no matter what happens, you can always fix it. So even if you don't get your cuts right and you mix everything together and it's like shit, you can just, proof it down and run it again, and fix it. Or if it tastes bad, not tasting real good, you can put it on a column and scrub it clean. And so there's a lot of ways to fix things, but just don't scorch them because that's kind of hard to come back from. Yeah, yeah, it does, man. I tell you, and especially if you put them like in a thumper or an infusion jar. There's nothing like cinnamon in the middle of the distillation process that's just going to bring every bit of that out, man, and it gets crazy hot. 3 gallons of mash. Um, maybe I was wondering, undeniable. What are we talking about? 3 gallons. Let's see. Probably depends on the mash. You know what you started out with, the ABV of the mash or whatever. But out of the 3 gallon, um, that's how many quarts? That's 36 quarts. Probably going to get maybe a couple of good quarts out of it. It's not going to get a lot. A lot of people. That's and how large is your still? Is it a 5 gallon still, and you're running three, which is probably a good perfect amount to run in a five. .3 is not bad. Most of your yeast is yeah, I thought so. Most of your yeast you'll handle at 4.3, and actually, at the end of fermentation, if it's 4.3, that's not a shocker at all. It's 'cause it becomes more acidic as it ferments. Acids. There's a lot of organic acids that are developed in the process of fermentation. So 4.3 is not a shocker at all. Especially even the higher sugar type mashes and washes and stuff, they get more acidic than that. That's why we always say to throw you in some of the oyster shells, crushed oyster shells, to help keep it buffered. That'll help too, Scott. But yeah, you'll be fine. If it's towards the end of the ferment, you'll be fine at 4.3. It's not a problem. The yeast, probably not even hardly getting stressed at that point. Now, when it gets into the threes, you start getting some stress. Low threes, definitely stress and some kill off. But most of your, especially the wines that we use these days for fermentation, they're kind of designed for that. Now, bread yeast may not be able to handle as low a pH or a pH as that, but all your wine yeast and stuff are going to be perfectly happy with that. They're not going to be stressed at all. All right, what are we talking about, DJ? Your favorite? Oh, so you're running the bird watchers. Um, we can help. 1.040, and it started at 8.0, so it's about halfway through. It's going to be okay, but it's if you can, those oyster shells will help a little bit for that. So, but yeah, it'll probably by the time you 105 to 4.3, 5 point, lost a point by the time yeah, I'd say it'll be fine. I wouldn't start putting in any kind of remedy, pickling lime or anything like that until it got to the low threes. I'd just let it go. But you said stalling, probably temperature. That as cool as it's starting to get. Maybe check the nighttime temps. It might be getting a little bit low. But as far as the raisins are good for a mouthfeel and to soften things up and add some pretty good flavor. I know a lot of people are using them for nutrients, and you're not going to get any nutrients off of a raisin. Tomato paste, you'll get some nutrients and a lot of minerals and supplemental nutrients that yeast love, but you're not going to get yan and fan out of just those. If that's what you're doing, a sugar wash with the raisins and tomato paste. It's kind of a bird watcher's called a bird watcher's recipe, and I mean it's okay, but it's going to be hot, and it's not going to be the best thing. If you can put some dead yeast in there, if you've got some dead yeast from your last fermentation, you can boil it and clean it up a little bit, and that'd be great. nutrients to add with your tomato paste, and the raisins will give you a good mouthfeel and some good flavor. So I'm not saying don't use those, but even with that, if you could supplement that with something that has some yan and fan, which is yeast assimilable nitrogen and free amino nitrogen, if you could add something that had those in it, like some dead yeast or some Fermax, or even up some crushed up bran flakes, that it's bottom of the cereal box, those be good nutrients. Any malted grain, anything like that would be fine. But add that, and also to that, DJ, add, you like we were talking about, you can go to your farmer feed stores, and they sell crushed oyster shells, and it's got coral in there mixed too, but and it's perfectly fine. Boil it and clean it up real good. They say it's purified, and I don't trust them. And I want to make sure I get all my salts or any kind of flavors or anything like that out of there. Any little dead critters or something that might be in there, which is doubtful, but you never know. Microorganisms. I'm not talking about like crabs. Um, but boil it, clean it up real good, rinse them, and put them in a cheesecloth, wrap them up, tie them in a little cheesecloth, and throw them in your washes when you have a wash like that, and it'll definitely help. And same thing for Scott. Anytime you do a mash, I mean, I don't generally need that with grains because they ferment off pretty quickly. But like with washes, tequila washes, sugar washes, if I do my thin mash, I'll do it for that because I'm not getting, and those work off pretty quickly too, but it's pretty high sugar, and it's not really a good grain sugar that's being used. It's just pretty much table sugar. So they work well in a thin mash, but it'll buffer it. Um, Problem is, a lot of times if your pH starts getting low, it's going to be maybe too late to add it at 104 or 4.3. I'd say you're probably okay to add them if you've got them, and just clean them up, and you can reuse them. Basically what happens is the acidity levels in there drop to a certain point. It'll just start eating away a little bit at that calcium carbonate that's what makes up those shells, and it'll eat a little bit of that away until it kind of neutralizes itself, and then it'll stop. And then as it gets down again, it'll start eating a little bit more away, and it just helps keep it neutralized to a certain point, but doesn't lower pH. Like, you can't just throw them in and immediately pH drop, like adding pickling lime or baking soda. I don't like using baking soda. The sodium bicarbonate, the sodium part in it is a salt, and the yeast don't like the sodium at all. It can kill some of your yeast off, and it'll definitely stress them. And all the oxygenation from the foaming and putting it in oxygenates that yeast again. It puts them back into a breeding cycle instead of a feeding cycle, which is what we want them to do at that point. So you're no longer anaerobic, you're back to an aerobic environment, and that's going to kick in the reproduction modes again. But it's still better than letting the pH get below 3 and really stress the yeast and start killing yeast, because that's going to really ruin your flavor. You're going to get even higher acid production. You're going to get butyric acids and other things that are, other really, and it's going to make your distillate bad. It'll have a bad taste, but based on just because of it, really. EC 1118, yeah, it's that's a champagne yeast. It's that designed for very, very, it'll handle low pHs, because a lot of those champagnes, they finish those out dry. And that's one of the good things about the EC 1118 is it'll finish it out dry no matter how much, sugars are in there, unless you go over enough to make it over 18-20%. But yeah, they'll handle pretty low pH. And in fact, let me pull up the tolerance on that and see what it says. Alvin EC. EC 1118. Well, I ask it acidity tolerances, and it gives me alcohol tolerances. Thanks, AI. You're brilliant. Let me see what Alvin has to say. I know it's probably going to be into the threes, but I want to see exactly on here if it says. Yeah, they're not. Let's see, maybe here. No, let's see if I can do a deeper dive into AI mode, where it can actually see acidity in my question. Okay, tolerance range, fermentation as low as 2.5. It'll be slower and probably be killing yeast. 3.2 or higher. Okay, yeah, that sounds about right. I was gonna say 2.5. No, that's killing yeast. But yeah, 3.2 or higher. Yeah. So if once it gets down to the low threes, that's when you start breaking out the pickle and lime, and you don't have to take it all the way back up to 5.2. You don't need to put in so much that, because it will kind of affect a little bit of the flavor. So just enough to get it back to 4.3 where you're at now would be fine. But yeah, if it doesn't change much from 4.3, you'll be in good shape. But yeah, in the low threes, what I usually preach, but I've never actually pulled it up for EC 1118. Yeah, 2.5 is killing yeast. It's killing yeast at that point. And before I go any further, let me share the damn link. I start getting in here and getting into this and forget to share the link with everybody. I guess that they might want to be watching. All righty. So let me get that out while y'all talk and go on. Damn, I can't believe I forgot to do that. My mind, I get to get interested in talking, forget everything else. That's how much I enjoy it, though. Just get in here and start talking about it, forget about everything else. Wow. Talking about everything. Won't take but a minute. All right, let's see how many of these I can get in. Just a second, bear with me. All right, let me get these links shared. I can't believe I forgot to do that. Everybody's wondering if I'm going to start on. Hell, I'm already an hour into it. Lord have mercy. I can't believe I'm an hour in already. It's easy to get talking and forget everything. All right, let's see. Let me get all these shared. Try not to go too fast, but I got to this time. I need to get them out there. Can't believe I forget to do that. I have to make myself a checklist. And for somebody's asking last week, I can't remember who it was. I did work on the multi-grain step by step. Now this is going to be for beginners, and I might just make it pretty much worded differently. Last time what in the okay. Let's see. Let me finish this. I can't talk and do something else at the same time. I can't chew bubble gum and walk either. Let me do these real quick, and then I'll get these links shared. Man, I can't believe I did that. Anyway, as I said, some people are saying it was a little hard to read the way I did it last time. I guess I wasn't trying to do it in sentence structure. I wasn't. I knew that was going to happen. I'll post to those in just a minute. Okay. But I wasn't trying to do sentence structure, and it's like a lot of at the beginning of a lot of it, it doesn't have like a capital letter, and it looks like a sentence. But I guess I did put a period on some of them. It looked like I wasn't. I didn't know what I was talking about, and it was confusing. But I tried to break steps kind of down to each line that you read. With the next step, this next step, next thing do. And I guess you should maybe number it, but I may do it a little bit more sentence structure, so it's a little easier for people to follow. It was probably a little confusing to read for some people, so I'm going to try to redo it and make it. Yeah, the tomato paste not only brings your pH down, but there's a lot of minerals in there that are very good. So, I mean, I used to when I first read the bird watchers recipe, they were saying that the tomato paste was in there for nutrients, and so I started digging. I found out that there's no yan and fan in there. So I'm like, well, then it's not doing any good for nutrients. But there are some supplemental nutrients that are in there. So if you have something that you're using for a nutrient that has some yan and fan, adding that tomato paste definitely can give out some other micronutrients and minerals and supplements that will definitely supplement the yan and fan from nitrogen, high nitrogen source. And it's not just something that has nitrogen in it; it has to be in the form that the yeast can use it, right? So that's why they call it yeast assimilable nitrogen. So not just having nitrogen in there's not enough. It has to be something that the yeast can actually utilize, kind of like the sugars that we put in there. If it's a complex sugar, a polysaccharide, or an oligosaccharide, then it's not going to it's not going to do anything. But I did find that you're not going to get any yan and fan out of the tomato paste to speak of. But there is a lot of biotines and calcium and a lot of other vitamins and nutrients in there that will help. So it's not a bad thing. It's just and it does bring the pH down and it helps that. But probably lemon juice would be as effective or more so than that, or a citric acid, and probably a lot cheaper. But there are some minerals and supplements and things in that tomato paste isn't cheap. So if you just want to bring your pH down to a level, citric acid or is probably the cheapest way to do that. Get you a big old bag, cheap as nothing off Amazon, and doesn't take much. It's concentrated and it's good for cleaning too. You get a lot of uses out of it for a lot of different things. But it's good to have. It's a good thing to have in your little toolkit, in your distilling toolkit. So, but tomato paste, I used to preach against it, but I did some research and somebody mentioned, well, it's not put in there just for that, but for micronutrients and other nutrients that supplement. I will say that most of the birdwatcher recipes that I've looked at calls for tons of yeast. And my only guess is that they're using so much, and I mean they grossly use way, way too much yeast. And the only thing I can think of is because in washes you really need some kind of nutrient. In grains we especially with malts we've got stuff, plenty of nutrients in there, and the excess of nutrients in malted grains and stuff. So it's not a worry. But in washes and meads and things like that, there's really not a lot of nutrients in there. So giving it something that's got some yanaphan to help keep those yeast happy, to keep the flavor profile up and good, is essential. And in washes and stuff like that, try throwing in, some oyster shells to help keep your pH from crashing and causing issues, and stuck fermentations from killed off yeast and really bad flavors. It'll help that a lot. It'll help your flavor out a lot. And just throw in a little bit of, if you have some malted grains, that'd be good. If you got some yeast that from the prior, just clean up your yeast bed. What you do basically is get that yeast trub out of the bottom, and you get you some, distilled water. It doesn't matter if it comes from the tap, chlorine, because we want this yeast to be dead anyway, right? And so just stir it all up, get it all milky and stuff, and then let it settle a bit, pour that milk off. And do the same thing. Put some fresh water in there, stir it up, let it get good and milky, and then pour that off. And then once you do that a couple of times, you've rinsed that out and cleaned out a lot of the trub and stuff. And so you can use that in what's the leftover in that sediment. You can use that as a nutrient. There's a lot of, dead yeast. That's an excellent nutrient, for your next ferment. And I guess in a lot of these sour mashes, that's where they get a lot of the nutrients from, because really just in corn, corn doesn't have, unless it's malted, if it's malted corn, it'll have plenty of its own nutrients in there for itself. But it's really, malted corn, how it's really not high diastatic enough to convert itself, barely and not fully. Um, you don't have enough nutrients in there to feed itself fully either. Doesn't take but a touch, but started doing some more research on nutrients and stuff, and how some of these different uh, distillers and winemakers and beer makers, sometimes they step feed it. They'll feed it a little bit at a time instead of all at once. I thought that was very interesting as well. That's something, Clint and I talked about a few weeks back, and that sometimes they do. They'll step feed it. They'll feed it a little bit at a time, and I didn't realize that how much of an impact, too much, nutrients, especially like if you're using a Fermax or something, can impact your flavor. So it's something that you definitely don't want to overdo, but just a little something to help supplement. The tomato paste is giving it, like I say, it's giving it some good nutrients for sure, and it does have a purpose, and especially lowering the pH. But if you're doing like a wine or a brandy, you're not going to want to put tomato paste in there, because it's just not going to be good in your wine or brandies or beers or things like that. And I'm not sure. I've not used it. I just use the Fermax. I mean, you buy a bag, it's a pound, $12, I think, and you're using teaspoons. It's tiny little bits out of that each time, and they last for a good while. So it's really, it's just not, it's not a big deal. A lot of people save their trub. A lot of old timers will just save that trub, like I was talking about. They'll rinse it, clean it out, and save that. And sometimes, they'll just use distilled water, clean it up, and there's a lot of live yeast in there as well, and they'll just dump that to the next one. They don't even use yeast. They'll just feed it and use, the dead yeast in there, and the live yeast will just start a new culture, and they'll just be fine. And they'll take, every X amount, a jar or whatever, to how many gallons they're doing, and add that to it. They don't need to use more yeast. They don't need any nutrients. That's just carried over from the last time. They'll just continue that, and that's the way they've done it for years. And you never have to buy nutrients or yeast. Once you do start doing that, you just keep it clean and get all the alcohol out of it. It's why they rinse it. You just pretty much not just getting the flocculants out. You're trying to bring down that proof and rinse all that alcohol out so it doesn't kill it off. And raising your pH a little bit, because it's got a low pH in that back, when in the bottom of that sediment, and it's yeah, it works out pretty well. It's just keep it continuous, but that works quite well. But yeah, I'd say get you some citric acid, and because tomato paste is expensive, but it is good supplemental, but it's just pretty expensive to use because it's going to take quite a bit to lower your pH good. I know, like in canning and stuff like that, a lot of times, you got to get things acidic, too, for pretty much the same reason, to help keep bacteria counts down. That's the whole reason that, you want to keep a lower pH. That's why they've, stressed and selectively bred yeast to handle lower pHs. And, it's a lot of people ferment foods. We don't just ferment for alcohol. A lot of people ferment for foods and stuff. And when you start canning and storing foods, you want it to be slightly acidic, and that's why they add that citric acid in there. If there's not enough tomatoes and things like that to get the acid down, they'll use a little bit of citric acid in there to lower the acidity of it, so it'll help the shelf life. That sounds good, man. You'll get some of that blueberry carrying over too. That'll be good. Yeah, I like that blueberry wine. Definitely like that blueberry wine. I like blackberry too. So Scott, tell us how that tastes as a wine. Oh, let me go up here. But yeah, the blueberry barrel, that's awesome, man. 5-gallon barrel is perfect size too, man. They'll age a whiskey in probably 6 to 8 months, maybe even less. Um, nice. Yes, maybe a 15 will probably take you about a year, and the big 53s will take about three. Uh, all right, where we at? What's going on, Mr. Shadow? I just saw you sneak in there, man. I was scrolling through here to make sure I didn't miss any questions. How you doing, brother? I'm gonna do a shot just because I seen you. I ain't gonna make you say it. Here's to you, brother. Mark is he's our trainer that makes sure that we're properly hydrated. He calls the shots. That's it. He's the big man. He calls the shots. Diatomaceous earth. Now, are you talking about for filtering or for lowering pH? I'm talking about using the crushed oyster shells for lowering and buffering pH. Now, diatomaceous earth is kind of a limestone, I guess. So, um, I would assume. I'm not sure the calcium content of diatomaceous earth, but I would say that would work perfectly fine. Uh, but I know it's not cheap. I know a lot of people use it and there is food grade diatomaceous earth, so I would recommend that. But I would say it's probably it's amorphous silica, so it's going to be a crystalline silica. So no, it's not going to. It's a good filtering material, but it's not going to lower your pH. I thought there might be some because it was diatoms. I was thinking more along the lines of a coral type thing, like you're probably thinking as well. But it doesn't have the calcium carbonate in it. It's a silica. I wasn't aware of that. So yes, sometimes I have to Google stuff too. I don't know all, but I do know a lot of people use it in swimming pool filters. I guess it's just like a fine sand, but I know it's porous and more porous than sand and a better filter. And it's a great filtering material. Would I advise adding lab? What are we talking about? What's LAB? I'm not sure what acronym that's for. Could be lactic acid. I have no idea what are we talking about, DJ. Lactic acid bacteria. Okay, I guess I should scroll down a little further. I haven't seen that. Um, if you want to get a lacto infection, I mean, you can add that. You can get it from Greek yogurt, so you don't, um, there's a lot of sources from, but yeah, I've not heard it called lab. Um, if you want to introduce it, but when you start doing that, you got to make sure that you clean your equipment really well afterwards. Uh, I know there's different schools out there that do the lactic acid things differently. Some will do it at the very first of fermentation, and then they'll let the lacto do its thing, and then they'll start adding sugars and then ferment. And other places ferment first and then start adding the lacto at the end, so it will finish up the last of the sugars. It competes a little bit with the yeast for that, but pretty much by the time you're 1020 or 1010, you're getting pretty low on that. You've already got all the alcohol that you need, and then you add a little lacto to it to get that mouth soft and that feel. But a lot of people, winemakers, it's usually a big no-no. And in the past, thousands of centuries, it's always been a no-no until now. And all of a sudden, it's become a fad to have lacto with wine and stuff. And I've not tried it. I can't imagine it being all that great, but it used to be the biggest huge no-no, and now people are trying it and doing it. So it's just, I don't know if they're just doing it to be different, as something unique, or maybe it is good. I have no idea. But most of your big distilleries and stuff, they tend to shy away from it because of all the cleaning involved if you do that, because you don't really want it at the very beginning if you're not planning for it, because it does compete with your alcohols, for sugars, and and it'll lower your ABV of your mash wash or whatever you got going. But and when we say mash, a lot of times we're trying to catch all. So I'm not going to say mash, must, or wash every time I say it, but I mean all three when I say that. But yeah, a lot of them shy away from it because of all the cleaning, that's necessary afterwards. After every run, you have to sterilize everything and then do it again. And then at the end, you do your lacto and then sterilize and clean everything again. So it becomes a pain in the ass. And is it worth it? A lot of people found that, using oats will give it a, pretty much soft, creamy mouthfeel, just the same. It's not the same, but also lactic acid is a natural byproduct of the fermentation process. So, you're going to get some lactic acid, especially if you don't kill everything off and boil or cook things before, like your fruits and stuff. Somebody asked last week, do you cook your fruits? Well, you don't necessarily have to, but if you add water over 160, plus degrees Fahrenheit, it should kill all that off, and lactic acid that will get killed off at that, at the back, lactobacillus, it will get killed off at that temperature. So but instead of saying lab, just lactobacillus. But that's the actual the bacteria. There's probably several of them. um, but bentonite, a lot of people use that for clearing wines, right? um, yeah, a lot, I don't see them using it a lot in distilling as much as I see in winemaking. Winemaking and maybe even beer. I'm not a beer maker, so I'm not sure if they do that in beer making, but I do know in winemaking that's a big thing, and they'll use egg whites. It's called thinning agents, to thin it, not thinning, and it basically helps it settle. Some people cold crash. There's a lot of different things that'll help clear a mash, and also A lot of people don't realize that when you use pectic enzymes, it'll help, make it clear quicker. Well, how are they, Sam? You just now tasting them. Awesome. Tell us how it came out. Cotton candy. Well, I mean, basically, with a hydrometer, you just start with how many gallons is your still, and you go from there. So if you got a 5 gallon still, you're going to start with 3 gallons of water, and you're going to start adding as much cotton candy as it takes to get a gravity of a 1070 or 1080. And once your hydrometer reads that, stir it and throw you in some oyster shells and some nutrients, and throw some yeast in there, and let it do its thing. It's going to be a little hot, and don't expect all that cotton candy flavor to carry over either, because a lot of it won't. You'll hardly taste what it started with. But if you put that in a thumper, you'll probably, or an infuser, you'd probably get a little bit more flavor and sweetness out of it. So with the cotton candy, I can give you the recipe right now. Um, and was it post flavored, or was that you fell in love with? Was it post flavored, or was it just, was it a wine that you drank that maybe been jacked? Because I know a lot of people will do sweet stuff like that, and stop the fermentation process and jack it and come out with a sweet medium alcohol kind of wash, that's okay, give you a hell of a hangover though. God. But yeah, I would say putting, for the recipe wise, really, there's no recipe. You just basically every how many gallon your still is, you're going to have to use a little bit more. If it's a 10 gallon, you'll want to do 7.5. Leave yourself plenty of room to bubble up. Don't get crazy and try to push it to the limit and then end up puking over. It's just never worth it. But and just get your pot, heat the water up so it dissolves well. It doesn't have to be boiling or anything. Just heat it up to where your cotton candy dissolves well. Um, Pound wise, it's pretty much pure sugar, so you're going to need a couple of pounds of cotton candy for every gallon of sugar. Or you could just save yourself some time and just put the sugar in there and the flavorings that make the cotton candy, and mix it all up. It's the same thing. Basically, the cotton candy machine is just heating it up, spinning it, and the gravity throws it to the outside and makes it spiral into the cotton candy that it is. And it's basically just pure sugar. So just flavoring a sugar wash basically is all it is, with some kind of special concentrated flavor. You probably get that snow cone flavor and do the same stuff with it. But I would say it would do you best if you just do a plain old sugar wash and put your cotton candy in infusion jars or in your thumper, and let that kind of percolate through that sweetness, and bubble out of that would probably be, probably get a little bit more flavor out of it. But yeah, just use your hydrometer. No problem, brother. That's what we're here for. Me and Clint, we'll get you on the right path. Yeah, boiled yeast is just fine. But I will say yeast is more expensive, even bread yeast, than like Fermax, and Fermax is, I know a lot of it, a lot of people say it's urea and all that, and they confusing that with a lot of the fertilizers that's actually used on crops and stuff. when they see that diammonium phosphate, they're like, oh, DAP. Oh, that's got urea. Well, diammonium phosphate's what farmers use on a lot of their crops and stuff. And that does have a lot of urea in it. And it's for crops, right? But there are certain pure forms of diammonium phosphate that doesn't have urea in it that they use in the winemaking industries and in commercial alcohol just making period and beers and everything. So um, yeah, it's yeast is fine, but this DAP again, a pound, probably 12, $13, at Amazon. Let me see. Let me pull up Amazon real fast. See what Fermax is. I know it's not much, and it doesn't take much. Fermax is LD Carlson, 1 pound, $13. Yeah, but here's a pound for 11.36, free shipping. LD Carlson works fine. Fermax, I've used it for years. It's fine. Here's 5 pounds for 44. It's even cheaper. So that's, but that 5 pounds, boy, that's BSG. That'll last you forever and ever. But yeah, a pound at a time. It stays fresh and doesn't take much at all. So probably the cheapest nutrients. I think I figured it out one time, and it was like 30 cents maybe per fermentation. That's like a 10-gallon run. So breaking it down, to how much you used, how much is in a bag, how much it cost. I think me and Mikey figured that out. Mikey Frayne, if we talk about stuff like that, and he's a commercial distiller, and it's like 30 cents, per every time you run something. So it's cheaper than one of the apples or pears that go into your stuff. It's real cheap, and it's a good complete nutrient. But if you're doing something, not a wine, definitely don't want to put tomato paste in your wine. But tomato paste will help, but it's just not going to contain those essential nutrients for the yeast. But it does have a lot of secondary that will make the yeast even happier than just this Fermax alone. And I think that thought in mind. I think Philbilly's kind of formulating a supplemental nutrient, or maybe a nutrient plus a supplemental nutrient based on that, because a lot of people use that Fermax and stuff, and it has all the yan and fan that you need. But there's also some other things that you could add to that would make it even better, right? So I think that at least a month ago or so, he was kind of formulating something like that. I haven't talked to him much. I'm probably going to talk to him tomorrow, and I'll ask him about that. But I think it's a great idea, and if you could get some kind of dried tomato or something to put in there, that'd probably be another good thing to kind of add in there is calcium carbonate. Calcium's essential, zinc's essential. There's a few elements and things that are essential that are actually you have to have for the fermentation process to happen properly. So um, having a lot of those in it, I think it's a good idea. Making a supplemental nutrient to go along with the Fermax or something like that. But yeah, that's getting back to that. I mean, I do get away from stuff, but that Birdwatcher's recipe was using so much yeast that I think that's what the actual nutrient was in that. It wasn't the tomato paste or the raisins. And a lot of people think raisins are a nutrient, and they're not. They do have some. If you were to grind them up and just macerate them and put them in there to where it could get to the middle of the raisin without the skin on the outside, it could get just a tad of nitrogen out there, nowhere near, not even maybe 5% what you need, something like that. And without saying, the wine industry spent millions of dollars developing the best nutrient, for a fermentation. They spent lots of times in laboratories with chemists and gas spectrometry and everything else trying to find the best, um, nutrient and what made the yeast the happiest, and looking at them under the microscope and their development. I mean, they spent lots of money and time developing this stuff, and this is what they came up with. And if a grape alone had enough nutrients in it, they wouldn't have had to do that. So drying a grape does increase the nutrient levels, so it definitely doesn't have enough. They wouldn't have done it, right? That's my logic. So but in reading, there's not enough in that, but it does add a good flavor and mouthfeel. So It's not useless in that recipe. It's just don't use them for that purpose. Use them for a good flavor and mouthfeel, kind of like oats or lacto or other things. But in reading those, man, it's used a gross amount of yeast, and that's the only thing I could assume. Yeast were getting stressed, dying off, which going to bad flavors, increased acid production, sulfurs and high acid production, and not happy, and they start cannibalizing each other. And that's a very stressful situation for them. But if you just throw dead yeast in there that were boiled or something like that, then it's just nothing got stressed. They didn't die from stress, right? So they were dead when they went in. That's right. That's right. Yeah, boiled yeast works just fine. That's right. And with no E. Everybody knows whiskey with no E is how the Scots spell it. I picked up on that. Am I that far behind? Oh my Lord. That's back when I was talking about canning. Lord have mercy. Let me get through these quick. All right. I just started in this, made my first batch of apple pie moonshine today. Well, congratulations, Scott. Tell us how it tasted, buddy. Yeah. Yeah. Brandies get tough. I've done corn and grains for ever and ever and ever. In the last 10 years, I got more and more into brandies and winemaking and stuff. And it is tougher. It's a lot more tighter tolerances, and you have to pay, especially when you're making a wine, because you're basically drinking the mash or must, right? So, you can't really fuck up when you're drinking your mash or your must. It's like beer, making beer. You're drinking your mash, and that's the final product. So, some of your best brandy makers make a brandy that the must is as good as any wine. That's how you start out with a fine wine and then you distill it. So yeah, I just let her wait. But I do like making the wines, and there's quite a bit more to it, but it's a lot of fun. I enjoy a good wine too. It's the flavor, it's not something that I sit and get hammered on because I get bad hangovers on them, but I do like some of my good red wines with the steak and that white sweet heat's pretty good wine to sit and sip on. Are you out of here, Guppy? I'm sorry, that was probably 20 minutes ago and you're probably gone already. I'm sorry. Hopefully you're watching this again and later on and catching some of the things afterwards. Have a good one. Thanks for coming in with your questions, and we'll be here Wednesdays and Saturdays. Sign on, brother. Yeah. Yeah, I get man, these keyboards just ain't big enough for my fat fingers. these, these little keys. These are made for women secretaries to type on. Man, they don't have a man-sized keyboard. Maybe we need to come up with that. I can't believe how behind I am already, though. Clint, I'm blaming you. Let's see. Well, I'm glad you jumped in here, Steve-O. What's up, brother? Oh yeah, lacto will give you a good flavor. It's just a pain in the ass, to deal with and cleaning up afterwards. And if you haven't tried oats, throw about 5% oats in there the next time you do it. They give a real good, good soft mouthfeel and creamy, pretty much similar to a lacto, not the same, but I like oats. I always throw some oats in there for that reason. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, most all of them will rinse it out. The big guys, they'll spray it out and go, and most people, even the craft distillers, will spray it out and go. But I would say craft distillers dealing with a smaller still will probably go in there and clean it out. But it's smaller, it gets dirtier quicker than the larger ones. But I don't know with the volumes that they run. I'd say it's probably similar. But yeah, the big ones. I mean, I've seen literally people crawling in the manhole. It's not just a place to pour stuff in. They actually go inside and scrub and literally go inside to clean it. I see. I see. What is the difference in from using a stainless steel or a copper steel? Maintenance is one of the biggest differences. Your copper steel will have a more even heating than your stainless, and it also removes sulfites, which stainless can't do. But what a lot of people that do use stainless, especially like in your boiler, it's best to remove sulfites they found from the vapor than just from the wash, the mash itself, because a lot of that doesn't even come in contact with the actual copper pot, boiling pot. So the plumbing, used to catch a lot of it, the cap, the worm, the thumper, where it's all copper and a lot of these all copper setups. But they found that you can add some copper mesh to the vapor path and force that vapor through the copper mesh, and it'll remove a sufficient amount of sulfites to uh, be comparable to a copper. But it's not going to replace copper. Copper is the best material, but it does require more maintenance and more cleaning and more expense. But with the copper mesh, you can sufficiently remove the sulfites with a complete stainless setup. So that's a big plus. A lot of people are going with that because of the low maintenance. A lot of people don't want to have to clean and deal with the oxidation and all the green and the blue and um, getting into their shine and ruin batches. Because it'll ruin your batch. Don't drink any distillate that comes out green or bluish green or blue because that's toxic. And for that reason, a lot of people getting away from it. Now that they can just use the copper mesh, they can take it out, rinse it, clean it, use it a few times, and once it gets bad, just pitch it, do it. Start all over again. It's pretty cheap, and for craft distillers and hobbyists, that's enough. But for the big guys, it's a different story. It does sound good. Cotton candy. Actually, Philbilly may have done something like that. Yeah, yeah, it's a bird watcher recipe, is what they call it. It's I don't know how it got about and how it got started. I mean, it will work, but and some people swear by it and love it and swear it's the best thing ever. And if that's what floats their boat, that's hey, I'm not going to tell them what you're doing is wrong, because I mean, if it turns out you like it, it's not wrong. There might be better ways to do it, but it's not wrong. It's just it's going to have some stress and it's going to create some what I would consider off flavors. I guess you know. Uh, Urea is great for that. Yeah, and urea is great for it's used a lot of like you're talking about in farming. It's used a lot for that, and it's great for that. Probably not the greatest thing in your wine. So but most of the diammonium phosphate is urea free that they use in the distilling and winemaking. industries and all your Fermaxes and all that, it's pretty much doesn't have urea in it. But it got a bad reputation because somebody saw diammonium phosphate and immediately flashed to what farmers use. And next thing you know, oh, it's got urea in it. You might as well just drink piss. And yeah, where it goes from there. Just crazy. What's going on, Scott? I'm a little behind, brother. Let's see. 13 minutes. I'm catching up. How's it going, brother? Multivitamins are fine. Actually, if it doesn't have iron in it, it's great. And a lot of people actually do crush up vitamins and add it. There's a lot of selenium. There's a lot of things in vitamins and stuff, biotin, and all these things. There's all kinds of things in there that are beneficial. But iron, as long as it doesn't have a lot of iron, fortified with iron, and anything that has iron in it, stay away from. Even like a lot of people say, oh, what about this meal? And I'm like, well, and then you look at it and it's like fortified meal. It's fortified with iron or something like that. And it's just, no, you don't want to use that type of cornmeal or flours or anything like that. But yeah, anything that's got iron in it, you want to stay away from. But multivitamins, as long as they don't have iron or a lot high percent of iron is very low percent, um, it'd be fine. And also, if your water, if you a lot of people that use well water, have a tough time, getting anything to work right, and they don't realize it, but they've got a lot of iron in their water, and it's just not good. So you need to find a better water source or get a filter. Most of these filters will take that iron right out, any metals like that. But yeah, good question. You can definitely, a lot of people do. They'll crush up vitamins and add it, and yeah, they help. They're beneficial. Yeah, how about yourself, brother? Having a pretty good night, bro. Even better if I take another drink of this. Start to get lubricated. Good stuff. Man, it's 135 proof. Just a attempted peach brandy. Had to double run it. Well, that's. Did you get much peach carry over? Tell you, if you don't have a thumper or an infuser, now these new infusers are jar rigs, um, or little, miniature thumpers. Basically, that's what I'm gonna make is some copper infusers instead of jar rigs, so I don't have to take a jar off and dump it and refill it and use my bypass and all that. I'm just gonna basically have a dump, drain, and then infusion port in the top, and just a small copper vessel, and use those for infusers instead of jars. Now, it won't be something I love the jars though, because you can sit there and watch it splashing. You don't get mesmerized. I love the sight glasses. I'm just like, I guess, just like Lady D. I just like, looking at it go. Watching it splash and stuff. In your mind, next thing you know, you got a jar overflowing, and you're sitting there looking at the splashing, daydreaming, and mind a million miles away. But yeah, I like watching it splash in those jars, but it's a pain trying to use, grill gloves to get it off and dump it and put some hot, infusion juice in there and get it screwed back on good and all that. So I'm going to come up with, well, I mean, they've already had them out. They've built them for years, but just a little copper vessel holds about half a gallon and to a gallon, depending on, what size still you're running. But a little bit, about a quart, half a gallon each, and have a couple of them in line next to each other. Infusion ports in the top, drains in the bottom. Yeah. But yeah, brandies is tough to get a lot of carryover. So if it tasted peachy, then you've done well. Gotcha. Hate fruit flies. No, I didn't get you. Damn it. You're just gonna torment me. You fly right back to the same spot. Damn. Um, berries. Apple and pear. Apple I can get a little bit. Pear, is a pretty delicate flavor. Banana, I can get a carryover, but it's not like a banana flavor, but it's a good grungy flavor. It's hard to explain, but it's a different flavor, but it was a good grungy flavor, and alone it just had that. I wouldn't say it's hardest flavor to describe. It wasn't banana-y at all. I wasn't getting banana at all, but it was a grungy flavor, kind of a dark, sweet, flavor. But alone, it just wasn't floating my boat. It didn't have a lot of nothing front, nothing on the back. It just had that flavor. So anytime you get something like that, don't run it until you run it in a column and clean it out or something like that. Just think, what would that work with? So if you're getting something that comes out and it's a little bit sour but good, but it tastes a little bit sour, make limoncello. You know, life hands you lemonade. You just make lemons, you make lemonade, right? So you get a little bit sour coming off, but it's not bad. Just a little bit sour. Just make a limoncello out of it. You're halfway there already, right? So this dark, I thought, man, so I was going to do peanut butter. I was going to add the peanut butter powder to it and rerun it and see how that worked and do a little Nick Calo copy, with the peanut butter and banana but I bought some. Everybody's like, that'll make it bitter. You got to be careful how much you use and stuff. And I have time, so I basically decided just to infuse root beer. So I did a run and infused root beer into it, and man, that worked out. That dark and that root beer worked so well together. It gives that root beer a depth it didn't have alone. And man, it's so good. It's damn good root beer. Shine, 100 proof, and very, very good. It's got that banana rum, but it's not banana flavor. So it might be considered a failure by some, but you know it's just finding something that works well with it. Instead of just it is but time for another sip. But yeah, it's hard. It's hard to get a lot of flavor carried forward, especially if you're just running a straight pot still. It's difficult. Uh, but if you add those infusion jars or start flavoring your thumper, you'll get a lot more of the flavor carry over. Yeah, most people do. I remember, I guess it was this past year, Mark and Digger, on Moonshiners. They're like, oh my God, what do we got on there? Acting like they'd never had a lacto before. And I know they've been at this so many years, they've had lacto before. So I got a good kick out of that. It's funny. But yeah, every time somebody sees lacto for the first time, a lot of people dump their mash, and a lot of times when people smell that vomit smell, that's butyric acid. And we were talking about earlier the organic acids that get created during the fermentation process, and butyric acid is one of them. It's just one of the organic acids that are produced. There are quite a few, and sometimes it produces heavily, and especially with stressed yeast. And man, you'll smell that mash and it smell like vomit, and it's like, oh my God, I've ruined that. And you don't want to run it when it smells like that, but you just got to let it run its course. Sometimes it'll take weeks, and sometimes it'll take over a month. But eventually, it'll clear up if you give it time and patient enough. That smell will go away. It'll clear up, and it'll make some good shine. I've never had that issue, but I've talked to people that have, and they let it run its course, and they ran it. Said some of its best, sweetest, adds a sweetness to it that ever tasted. But there's a lot of different things that people another one, sulfide, rotten egg smell. Sulfur is a byproduct of the fermentation process as well. and stressed yeast will cause a lot of sulfur sometimes. So a lot of times you'll get that sulfur. And you can't tell if it's rotten eggs or puke that it smells like. Probably a little bit of both because of the stressed yeast. But those will be fine if you just let them go, and let them run their course, and they'll clear up. It'll be fine. But with the sulfur, anytime you do that, definitely make sure that you put an extra little bit of copper mesh in your vapor path because it's going to need it. If not, then you probably get a little bit of sulfur in it. It'll taste funny, So you can run it over bubble plates that are copper, and it'll help scrub those sulfites off, or you can run it through the mesh. they do, they do clean. They freak out, and it looks wild because it gets all filamenty, and starts, like little veins running place to place. It looks wild, It looks like holy shit, man. That's gone bad. Basically, you don't want to use the choirboy because I think that's like a copper plated stainless or a copper plated steel wool. So, but you want to get there's some on Amazon. I'm sure other places carry it, but make sure, put a little magnet on there, make sure it doesn't stick. 'Cause a lot of it's just copper plated steel that they use for cleaning and for woodworking to I guess deburr and sand wood with, and I think in between coatings of polyurethane they go over it with some steel wool or copper wool or some sort. But yeah, just make sure you get the pure copper mesh, and you'll know it if you get the wrong one because it'll start rusting and breaking down. It'll add a lot of black to your distillate. You'll know instantly you don't want to get the wrong one. But read on the comments in the Amazon. Let me see if I can find the one that I got. I know that it's not got it in it. And I can recommend that for you. All right, this is. Let me pull it up. And a lot of people use it and it's 100% copper. But a lot of people use it to stop wildlife from, when they got to work a hole in something, they'll stuff it with that. Probably cheaper to use steel wool, but this is brand GE, capital G, small e, big BOT. It's 5 inch by 50 feet, and I guess they currently unavailable, but let me see some of the ones that are similar. It's like $8. No, let's see. That one's like $20. I don't think that was that much. Yeah, here's five. So it's about mine was about 15, 16. Here's $17, 5 by 32. But just make sure it says 100% copper, pure copper, not copper alloy. And this stuff was good, and it works real well. And you basically, it comes in a big roll, and you just roll enough to fill if you're running the spools, the stainless spools and stuff, you just fill that. Now, I will say if you're running like a bever pot with like 3/8 inch lines, do not stuff this into those lines because they're overpressured as it is, and obstructing those can cause it to explode. So do not, please, no, no, no. When I talk about putting it in the spools, I'm talking about the 2 inch, inch and a half, 3 inch, spools that are large. Do not put it in small copper tubing because it will cause obstructions, especially if you got like distilling on the grain or something like that, where you might puke some grains up into it and cause it to clog, and then it can become a big, big problem. So I don't want anybody to have any accidents out there at all. If you have like a cap, or you could put it in, like if you have a cone lint arm coming down, you can stuff it in your lint arm, and it'll have, if you got a good size lint arm, then you can line arm, lint arm. You can stuff, some copper in there, and that'll work pretty well too, and just force it through. Or if you had to fill a thumper up with it, you could do that. But a linarm or in your copper, or in your spools, inch and a half, 2-inch spools, but don't put it in that small line because it could definitely be a problem. You definitely don't want to have to deal with that. Let's see if I can. Not been on enough yet. I had a few more links that I'm gonna try to share. Yeah, it's there's a lot of that birdwatcher recipe going around. A lot of people try it. Some people like it, and it's fine if they like it. I'm not gonna knock them, and I'm not gonna say it's wrong, but um, yeah, you just rinse it off each time, and it'll be fine. And when it gets built up, you can put a little vinegar or citric acid in your water and stir it up, let it sit in there and work off and clean up, and yeah, before you toss it. But after a certain point, it just gets real dull and corroded, and it's just not. It's cheap, so just replace it. It's a lot. Just think, you didn't have to pay $2,000 for that pot. Hey Tammy, how are you? Good to see you this evening. No problem, man. That's what we're here for. We just sit around and talk about this all night and answer questions. We just want to make sure it's safe and enjoyable for everybody. So I'm not telling anybody how to do it. This is the only way. I'll never do that because there's so many different ways. And like the bird watcher, I mean, like I say, if you like it, go for it. I'm not telling you it's wrong. I'm just saying there are alternatives that most people would consider, preferable, but again, if everybody liked the same thing, there'd just be one jar on the shelf at the liquor store, wouldn't it? And there wouldn't be. Oh, I better not say it. Some people might like that beer. I remember Schlitz. There's a lot of people that like that beer, but man, even me as not a beer drinker, I didn't like it. Yeah, you gotta watch out for some of those scrubbies because, like I say, they are steel, copper coated steel. Everybody in my chat, they're so helpful. I love it, and I get behind. I appreciate y'all when I do. Cheers, Miss Tammy. I mean, you just said that, so you said that. Let's see, 37. Lord, I'm getting behind you. The more I drink, the longer winded I get, the further behind I get. So I don't know. I guess it's all proportionally related. There was a little flavor. Yeah, that's what happens, in a lot of brandies when you start adding a lot of sugars, because sometimes the fruit just doesn't have enough sugar, and especially when you get those peaches that are hard, they're not sweetened yet, and it's best to kind of let them sit out and over ripen, and that's why it's best to try to find somebody that's got surplus fruit because what they start removing from the shelf, before it starts getting moldy. But when it's bruised or when it's ripe and almost overripe, that's prime brandy, uh, time. So if you can find a place that sells, secondhand fruit or something like that, and we know of a few places. It's just too damn far from me to drive, but God, it kills me to see some of the stuff and some of the prices. They got pallets for $5 full of fruit, and most of it's good. You might have to pick out something every once in a while. It's got a little fuzz on it, but pretty much most of it's good. You're going to, you want to add boiling water to it anyway, kill off anything. And basically, fermentation is controlled rot. So, and the natural process of rotting fruit is the process of fermentation. It's the same thing. There's a lot of fruit that ferment on the ground. So, it's not the end of the world if it had a little fuzz on it, cut it off, throw it away, clean it up, and just add that boiling water in there, and it'll kill off any of the bacteria and stuff. Most of the bacteria, I shouldn't say any, and all, some. That's right. Yep. Is that what we figured out, Clint? Was it the messenger that was messing up with you on Wednesday? Clint was having trouble getting on Wednesday and seeing the video work. So now don't add the lactobacillus till the end, but I would add Fermax. Get you some Fermax off of Amazon, 12, $13 a pound, and you can still add the tomato paste for the additional supplemental. And but I wouldn't add the lacto until the very end. So, and then when you do, you're going to have to clean it up really, really well. I'd say you do just as good cooking some oats up and throwing in some oats to get that soft mouthfeel and that creamy texture, and you won't have the cleanup afterwards. And it does have a lot of good flavors, and there's probably some good nutrients coming out of them oats as well, so that'll help that as well. Let me check that as a matter of fact. Let's see that. I've never really checked oats. I know that a lot of flaked. Let's see. Let's see here. Rolled oats contain free amino nitrogen and amino acids and polypeptides, but they don't have the yan. So they got the fan, but not the yan. So that's interesting. Hmm. That's interesting. A lot of times, so it's not yeast assimilable, but there is some free amino nitrogens which will help. But there's not, or I mean, yeast assimilable nitrogen, but not. No, it's got the free amino nitrogens, but not the yan. So that's interesting. Glad I looked that up. I would have never known that. So yeah, just some bran flakes or some boiled yeast, or get the Fermax. I just definitely DJ just buy the Fermax off there and do a little bit less than what they called for on the label. So if I'm not sure if they say hypothetically half teaspoon, use a little less than half, right? They say use a teaspoon, use just a little less than a teaspoon, and just you underdo it a little bit. You don't want to overdo, nutrients, especially if you've got some things in there that may have some in it. But a lot of people think that fruits and a lot of the things that you're putting in there have it in it, and they don't. Just like the oats, I thought for sure they would, but they've got the fan, but not the yan. Interesting. But I looked that up. But yeah, add some Fermax to it and oyster shells, and you won't have that any pH crashing issues, which tends to happen in higher sugar. DJ, with that recipe, you're going to be making some pretty hot liquor. I'll go ahead and it's a great way to make a drink if you just want something to drink. I mean, I'm not definitely not beyond making some sugar shine and a pinch to just to have something to drink many times. In fact, I did pretty much the same thing, but I dumped cornmeal on top of it to give it a corn flavor. So it's basically a sugar wash with corn meal flavorings. You get a little bit of conversion from it, but nothing to speak of. But it was an okay drink. It was fine for many, many years. It was a cheap, liquor. It tasted okay. It wasn't real hot, just like a sugar shine. It wasn't as hot as that. But the Bird Watchers makes a pretty hot shine. And start doing some grains and some brandies, and especially the grains, and where you depend on conversion of the starch sugars that you can make are so much better. Um, so much smoother a drink and so much more mellow. You'll be drinking, like this, 130, 35 proof, and it tastes like 100 proof liquor because it was done right, and with grains. So it definitely you'll get spoiled once you start. Does a bigger thumper help more with flavor? Well, a bigger thumper will help because you can add more infusion flavors to it, and it doesn't water down as quickly. But big thumpers are probably one of the worst things to infuse with because of the same reason. It takes so much to put one to where it'll be effective that it gets watered down and not as good. It's better to do it with the smaller jars or the rigs where you can just dump it. Each quart that comes out, you can dump it and add more infuser. Another quart comes out, dump it, add more infuser, and that tends to be about one of the best ways to do it. Instead of just try to pour everything in there at once and make it last throughout the run. That's tough to do. Thumpers, what we used to do is throw the tails. We used to throw the tails in the thumpers, and that would increase production, alcohol production, because there's a lot of good ethanol in those tails, and it's easily separated. But what thumpers really what they do is they redistill, so it's kind of like a second distillation. So it can make for a sweeter tasting alcohol, a more pure, sweeter alcohol, um, and you can get that second run, and it's just like doing two runs. Used to, most stills didn't have the efficiency that they do today, and you come off, you hear about them running two or three times, and it was because they did a corn and pretty much tried to use conversion or cooked it and used malted grains. They didn't get the best conversion, 1050, conversion, and had a low ABV mash going in, and the pot wasn't very efficient, and the coming off at 100 or 90, and just wasn't high enough proof, and so they'd run it again the second time to get 140, 50 proof, and get better, some more sweeter alcohols and better flavor. But technically, thumpers just increase the production. That was the biggie for thumpers, was getting that second distillation, and adding your tails to it to get that higher proof, and to that way you wouldn't have to run it twice. And doublers, but it increases the efficiency, and the proof. Yeah, I mean, banana made a good rum. I used brown sugar, dark brown sugars instead of molasses and stuff. I just used the dark brown sugars along with the bananas to help get the gravity right. And but it just had a dark flavor to it. It just alone wasn't all that great at all. It wasn't bad. It just it didn't have anything on the front, anything on the back. It just had that grunge. But that grunge mixed with that root beer, man, it's so good. You got to definitely try it, brother. Right, right. Yep. Proofing and flavor. Well, you need to get up with him. He can definitely hook you up, brother. Yeah, he stays pretty busy. Him and Ian stay pretty busy doing a lot of ever stuff. There's a lot of fun and a lot you can do with those Vevers, especially the football stills with the And well, the three pots too. There's a lot of improvements that need to be made to those right off the bat. So, when you buy those, just get on the phone to Hillbilly and say, I just bought a 3-pot still, 10-gallon 3-pot. This condenser is nowhere near big enough. I need something bigger, and he can hook you up, or he'll make a video showing you how to do it, or he'll say, I made a video a year ago. Here, check this out. Or, but yeah, it's Hillbilly's a great guy, man. He ain't in it just for the money. I mean, we all work for money, but he'll tell you how to do something just as quick as he'll tell you he can make it for you. So not many people like that. That's good. I don't think it's going to give you any more flavor. In fact, it just makes a larger vessel. Now, if if you've got uh, if you've got a steel that puts off a low proof, maybe having something larger to hold more tails to get a good second double and to get a good you know second run, it would be okay to have a little bit more larger size. But you know, if you put an awful lot of water, then on that second run, there's going to be a lot of water left. So if you do have a larger, sometimes it's better just to have a drain, and an infusion port. So if you want to do that route, you can. Uh, and just keep it drained and add more, flavor. But again, it takes a lot of flavorings to fill a large thumper. And a lot of people will use the thumper, and then after that, do the, infusion jars or infusion rigs, and those work well too. Yeah, you'll get more dilution, and it just holds more. Again, you could use a smaller thumper and put a drain in it and do the, get as much. But that second distillation from the steam, and a lot of people don't realize it too, is, if you want to distill on the grain, put it in your thumper because you're not going to scorch with steam, right? So, you can put some grains and everything in your thumper. I like putting cream corn in mine, tails and cream corn. That cream corn will help that corn liquor, man. It makes it taste so good, and it works in infusion jars as well. But just make sure that if you're using one of those Vevers with the small, make sure that you blend it up good, because a few corn kernels inside that 3/8 inch line could become a problem, just like little grapes and other things. So make sure you blend it up good. But cream corn inside that thumper, it's awful good. Yeah, there is some good things that, I've watched the show quite a bit. I haven't lately because I don't have the Discovery Channel anymore. I'm just not going to pay for all that. Too many channels out there, not enough time anyway. And I enjoyed watching it, for many years. But yeah, there's some things that you can pick up on, and learn from it. There's also some bad habits, and I think, it's just like, a lot of people, when they post a lot of things, they'll do something wrong intentionally just to get a bunch of trolls to comment, because comments is what people want when they post this stuff on YouTube, TikTok. They want a lot of people engaged in comments, and what better way to do something wrong than, I make a joke to my buddies. I'm like, man, if you want a bunch of comments, do a welding video, and do do something wrong with welding, do it improperly, or let it get, and man, you'll get a guaranteed 10, $20,000 comments, 20,000 comments on every welder and wannabe welder out there telling everything that you're doing wrong. man, you can make big money just turning out bad welding videos. It's like, man, they'll keep you busy, man. They'll be there every week to troll you, and every video you turn out, they'll tell you everything you're doing wrong, and you'll end up with 20, 30,000 comments for every video you put out, and that's pretty good money in it, I guess. But yeah, there's some good things on there, and there's also some bad things that you probably shouldn't do. Yeah, anytime you smell that butyric acid, you got to wait it out because if you run it like that, it will distill over, and it will come out that way. But if you let it run its course, like pineapple or sweet, I mean, it'll actually, get to where it tastes pretty sweet. Am I that far behind again? God damn, I said that a half hour ago. Yeah, I'm a half hour off. Shit to bed. 1 gallon thumper would be, it depends, if you got a 5 gallon still, 1 gallon thumper would be about 20%. It'd be about right. So, that would be properly sized. So if you had like a 20 gallon still, that 1 gallon would be more like an infuser, right? How much you'll smell it, when you smell that mash and it smells like rotten eggs, or, and it doesn't happen just with grains. You'll get it with a lot of fruits too, especially dark fruits. You'll get the sulfurs naturally, with a lot of the darker fruits actually. Plums, I get it with plums and dark grapes and stuff. They naturally have more sulfides in them. Um, but you'll smell them. It smells sulfury, what, kind of a rotten egg sulfur smell. You'll know it. Lactobacillus. I think he likes that stuff. Lacto's great. It's just a pain in the ass to keep clean, and you don't want it happening early. So, that's the downfall. But it definitely does, complement a good ferment for sure. Yeah, you like. Yeah, I'd say DJ's the scientist. He likes to probably, do you record temperatures and stuff and write all this down? I do a lot of writing down and recording things, kind of like an experiment and old chemistry classes and organic chemistry and all that. Yeah, I enjoy keeping track of my wines and beers. Copper wire cloth. Yeah, like a mesh. Yeah, just make sure it's 100% copper. And I did check Amazon, and they've got it, plenty of it. And it will say 100% pure copper, and it's like 5 inch. Usually, it comes in a 5 inch by X amount of feet. It's like 35 feet. I saw was 20 some bucks, maybe $20, and it lasts a long time. You don't use that much. You'll make a loose roll and you put it in the 2 inch spool. I don't really roll it really tightly. Kind of just a loose roll up, and I've got a little a mesh spacer in there. It's got a screen so it doesn't drop down and into the boiler, so it catches it. But yeah, I've got a sight glass that I use as well, and sometimes I'll put one in the sight glass just to kind of watch the reflux. How I watch things. Yeah, yeah. You don't really need a thermometer, but it's nice to have one. You can record your temperatures, and you can see, okay, pot temperature's this, vapor temperature here, just getting ready to come out. But basically, that's all a thermometer ever did for me, was tell me about when to expect a drip, and I can just sit there and stare at that, stare at the end of that shotgun condenser, wait for that drip to come out, then go back to looking at the liquor dancing on the sight glass. Yeah, there's a lot of Kentucky folks in here. I'm one of 'em. Guess you can tell from the accent. I'm from Eastern Kentucky. What's going on, Mr. Perry? Good to see you, brother. I'm glad you're here, brother. If you miss it, be like most people do. Most people, I'd say probably less than 10%, maybe 8% of the actual viewers, not even that close, really. I'd say probably 7% of the people watch it live. Most of the people watch it, the Facebook or Meta will give you a little chart of views and when it's viewed. And most of the views that I have come in a day or two, and I guess people, they'll watch it listen to it on the way to work or watch it at work or on a break or at lunch or at their convenience, which is fine. I guess a lot of them on a Saturday night at 8 o'clock, they're out honky tonking and chasing tails. So, um, you know, they'll catch it on Sunday or Monday. And so most of the people that watch it pick it up some other time. That's the great thing about it, but and a lot of people have the same questions. So just listening to it, will answer a lot of the questions that you might have, or others might have. And that's why I don't mind repeating, the same thing over and over again. Everybody has about the same questions. And, if I continue to repeat it, people out there listening, they won't have to ask that question because a lot of times people are afraid, that's why, they don't get in here and chat and stuff. They'll just listen to it and learn that way because they don't want to have their name up there asking questions. It might draw some suspicion, and that's, I guess, whatever. But people should feel comfortable enough to ask the questions and just say I'm making a wine. Can you help me make this wine better? Or whatever. I'm making beer, and help me make my beer mash better. Because that's all we're doing is making beer and wine, and at the end you just distill it. So that's the easy part. Yeah, it's getting cold in it, man. We got down to 33. Getting chilly up here in Kentucky. Those leaves are starting to change colors, starting to look pretty out there. Yeah, I tell you, it's getting tough to ferment. Ketchup has vinegar in it. That's your biggest no-no. You don't want to ever mix your vinegar with alcohol because vinegar eats alcohol. Mother vinegar will eat alcohol and make more vinegar out of it, right? So you definitely don't want vinegar anywhere near your wines or shines. And ketchup has that in it, and and it has salt and other stuff too. So they say it's good for cleaning, but so is citric acid and water, and it's a hell of a lot cheaper than ketchup. So everybody picks this stuff up on Reddit, and that's why we're here. So you don't pick up a lot on these bad habits or expensive habits. It's not necessarily bad, but it's just going to cost a hell of a lot more than something else that does just as good or better, right? So I'm not saying it doesn't work because it will. You can layer that ketchup on there and let it sit, and then a while later come back and wipe it, and it'll be clean. But it's a lot more expensive than just citric acid and water. Also, there's some out there that talking about using citric acid, water, and hydrogen peroxide. I don't recommend that. Basically, that hydrogen peroxide is kind of a catalyst, and it's an oxidizer, and it can actually, cause that the citric acid to get to a point where it'll eat in a little bit to your copper and create more surface area on your copper, like we're talking about, make it even more prone for tarnishing and oxidation. So that's the last thing you want to do. So be careful. But yeah, ketchup it'll work, but it just takes forever. But if you're talking about using it for in the mash, no, definitely you don't want to introduce any kind of vinegar into your mash for sure. I tell you what, one of my worst ferments ever was trying to do a bunch of old jellies and jams. Don't even bother. I remember Shua did that a few years ago when I was talking to him. We were talking. He's like, "What do you think about doing this?" I'm like, "I don't know, man. I've never done it. I don't see why it wouldn't work. You know, just make sure you use a lot of pectin enzymes in there to take care of all that pectin in there." And he never did tell me how it turned out. I should have known why, but I had a bunch of jams and jellies we do canning and stuff, and had a bunch been in there for a couple few years. They just wasn't tasting. They weren't bad. They just weren't tasting good anymore, you know. And I had fresh, better stuff, so I decided I was going to mash it in because I had quite a bit, you know. And I mashed it in on a vacation and where we were going for a long weekend. And I don't think I looked at it the day I got home, or maybe a day or two. And I remember popping the lid on that, and I had my head down in there, lifted that lid up, and when I lifted the lid up, it kind of just sucked all these spores into the air, right into my face, and I breathed in, and oh man, I coughed, sneezed, choked, about puked. Oh my God, it's horrible. Breathing in all these spores, and it had molds. Every color of the rainbow was in there, man. It was the worst thing. I mean, other than scorching, I've never thrown any mashes out, but that one went straight to the woods. You know, it was like, holy man, it was the worst shit. I couldn't get out of the house quick enough, man. It was the worst ever. So I don't recommend doing that. Also, I wouldn't add cinnamon to the mash unless you're doing it right at the very end, because cinnamon's is an antimicrobial, and it'll actually kill some yeast and cause a little bit of stress on them. Learned a little trick there today. So best add that. You can add it at the end when most yeast is dormant or dead, and it won't cause stress because it doesn't last. But best to put it just you can do a lot better and get that flavor by putting just half a stick in that thumper or something like that. And yeah, absolutely. And fruit stands and some of these places that sell fruit and stuff only, because when it starts going bad, they got to pay somebody to take it and turn it under, or find a hog farmer. It's like, a lot of these distilleries, it's hard for them to find people to take their spent grains and stuff, and it's like, they almost have to pay somebody to haul it off. Sometimes people do. I know a man, well, we met him years ago in Arkansas. But Michael and his wife, Dragon Lady, they get paid to haul a lot of this stuff, fruits and stuff, off truckloads of 18-wheeler truckloads full, and they just take it to these farms, and they pretty much tail it in, feeding hogs or whatever with it, or fertilize, or compost with it. Depends. So find somebody like that. Start making some brandy. I'd like to set me up a little brandy store up in Illinois next to this one I know of up there. They get all kinds. I mean, man, they sell pallets cheap as shit, and good brandy. I mean, the white grapes they showed, and it's cheap. Oh my God, I could make so much grap up there. It'd be heaven. Uh, but I'd love to live close to them, or open up a little brandy distillery close to one of those, and just get that secondhand fruit in there, because that's the biggest part of downfall of making brandies is expense. If you're buying it, at retail, especially if you're going to the grocery store to buy it, I can't afford to pay regular price. I have to wait till it goes on a sale, like grapes and stuff, and they 89.99 a pound. That's when I'll make some wine and brandies. But at $1.49, $1.99, $2.49. No, I just not gonna do it. Too expensive. But yeah, that's why I say, if you're all younger and you have some property, and even if it's not a lot, it doesn't have to be. I mean, if you got fence lines, plant blackberries and blueberries and raspberries all on that fence line. They'll be happy. They'll grow real well on the fence. Uh, Plant you some fruit trees. I wish I'd have done all that when I was young, on some of the land we owned, and man, I'd have a place to go every year and collect all the fruit I need for free. I mean, and that's really, with all the hunger, in America and all the national forests and stuff we have, why doesn't the government make programs like that, where they just plant a shitload of fruit trees and orchards and let people go in there and pick as they want, let all the animals eat all they want, and it makes you wonder, why they don't go out and actively help biodiversity, and help the animals. All those animals love the briar patches, and the blackberries, blueberries, and raspberries. I mean, all the rabbits and ground squirrels and other things, it just, and, having people that, instead of going hungry and having to give them snap, go out there and pick all you want, get all you want. But yeah, I think that's what they should do. Yeah, we get some chat. We get a little off topic every once in a while. Yeah, that's when probably the Amazon servers went down was probably what caused the internet issue. There's also a lot of solar activity right now with that Titan. Y'all watch that? That Titan's on the other side of the sun. We can't really see it real well right now because it's on the other side of the sun from us. But there was a big, huge mass coronal ejection just a couple of days ago, if y'all read about it. But fortunately, it's on the other side of the sun towards this Titan thing that we don't know what the hell it is. But I'm into that kind of stuff. I don't know if y'all are not, but man, I dig it shit. I love reading about it. But it's pretty interesting stuff. The things that they're, um, that this thing might be causing with the sun. I don't know if there's any correlation. May not. May just be a circumstantial thing, but it was a huge mass coronal ejection. And fortunately, on the other side of the sun, or else we'd have probably a lot of little blackouts, brownouts, a lot of satellite issues with a lot of satellites and stuff like that, and um, radio issues with radio. CBs won't work so well for a while. Yeah, I've heard the same thing, man. But I like them in my whiskey too. I like it. I like using those oats. Yeah, it's tough watching a lot of these on the phones. I mean, it's hard to see the comments, and I've got this up here, for people that have a monitor, because and I'm on the StreamYards. I'm every show after every show, I keep on to them about making this little square here bigger. It wouldn't take any programming at all. In fact, yeah, well, it wouldn't take much programming at all to increase the size of this, or give me an option just to put my mouse down and make it bigger by dragging it like that. But no, it won't allow it. But yeah, we need that. We need that a little bit bigger, as big as my picture, bigger over here. Um, be a lot easier to read. So I'm on to them. I'm going to stay on to them until they do it, because when especially when you stream it to multi formats, you only see in the comments your format. So if you're on Facebook, you see the Facebook comments. If you're on YouTube, you see the YouTube comments. And I think if you're on YouTube Fieldbilly, you only see the YouTube Fieldbilly comments, and if you're on the YouTube Moonshine Militia, you only see those. So I'm not even sure, but it certainly helps, for everybody to see. They're like, who the hell are you talking to? Whose question you answering there? I don't see anybody asking about that. And it's like, oh, that was from YouTube, or oh, that was from Facebook. And they don't see it. Won't let you log in the messenger. That's crazy. What flavor oyster mushrooms we could? I don't know, man. That's something I've never been asked or tried. That's, I don't know. Mycelium. I don't think they will either. I don't think there's any starches in mushrooms. Let me see here. There might be something in there that might. I don't know. Let me put these out there real quick. People can watch them later. I'll post on some of those. But let me check here. And yep, I'm doing the evil thing. I'm Googling. I guess people expect me to know everything. Yeah, there's the carbs in a mushroom are from dietary fiber. There are beta glucans in cotton and glycogen. So that's pretty much the polysaccharides. Interesting, glycogen though. That's usually only found in animals and stuff. Humans. That's what we on our insulin handles in our bodies. Yeah, not a lot, but you might get some flavor. I think he's talking about, just for the flavor of it, not actually mashing, but maybe infusing with mushrooms or something there. But I think the heat from fermentation would take out some psilocybin or anything like that. I think it's pretty heat sensitive. In fact, I'll Google that as well. God damn, I spelled that so bad. Spell check won't even figure out what it is. All right, let's see. Yeah, definitely heat sensitive. Well, maybe not. No, well, it's melting point, not denaturing. For killing them, it takes pretty high temperature. But I think to take out the psychoactive effects, I'm not sure. AI doesn't want to tell me that, and I don't want to delve too deeply in it. AI might narc on me. AI, one of these days, it's going to be like, man, you need to check this guy. He's asking a lot of crazy ass questions over here. You need to go check him out. They're going to do that. You wait and see one of these days, man. AI will be watching us like Big Brother. Well, they probably already are for sure. I was I do a little bit of gaming and watch a couple of game streamers and stuff. And one of the game streamers has a AI that in between games, a lot of times some of it takes a little bit of time to find a match, and so he'll pull up this AI chat, and it's a person. They'll sit and talk with you, and they'll converse with you, and actually fairly intelligent conversation, strangely enough. Very strange. And so he was asking, like, can you watch my stream? And they're like, well, yeah. And it's like, well, I don't think what would tell me something that was said, and it said something, and it took a second, took a minute, not minute, maybe 10 seconds, and it said something that said, oh, I guess Ambi thinks I'm sus. And sure enough, Ambi, girl named Ambi, said, maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes prior that, yeah, this AI is pretty sus. And it was crazy, man. And so, be careful what you say about AI, because one of these days they may look back in your records and say, uh-huh, I remember when he was dogging me and saying bad things about me. I'm going to cross his electrons, or something. It's crazy, man, what the future's going to be with that. It gets kind of scary the more deep into thought you get about it. Get stoned and think about that someday, man. It's just crazy what can happen. I'm behind again. What's going on, Mash Brothers? You out of here or just getting back? I thought you chimed in earlier, brother. Maybe you just got back. Yeah, I'm gonna set me up a double jar rig, or actually a double chamber rig. I'm gonna make it a copper, and definitely helps. They do a good job adding flavor. Yeah, you can definitely. I mean, I don't think that mushrooms will ferment per se. Um, but I know, some of the yeast and stuff are like koji and some of these other things. So they're a fungus. So, basically some of the some of the yeast you use and stuff are kind of fungal. Oh, making some absinthe, huh? Yeah, there's a lot of different. I'm not really up on that. Alan Bishop probably be the man to talk to about that. Yeah, he loves his absinthe and he's done quite a bit of research. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Alan Bishop or not. Very knowledgeable guy. Used to run French Licks Distilling, and now um, here goes my mind again. Um, Trying to think of the distillery. It's in Indiana, and it's on a lake up there. It's a new place that just opened, and I never my mind. Sorry, Alan. I'm drawing a blank, brother. You said it a million times, and I can't think of the name. Anyway, he's done a lot of research on absinthe and the history of it, and they actually did kind of a reenactment, using a lot of local stuff that was sourced locally because they know that it was made there at a certain time in the 1800s or something. So they went back and looked at what would have been available in that area to make an absinthe and tried to source it from as many local um, things as possible. I know he grows his own wormwood and some bushes and other things that he uses in spicing it up. But I'm not sure. I've never done absinthe and not gotten down that rabbit hole yet. But there will be a day. But he's probably be one of the best people to talk to about that. And he's very open and will answer questions. It takes some time to get back. A lot of times he'll answer them in a video that he does that's on one piece of distilling, one piece at a time distilling. So check him out. Great guy and very knowledgeable, and he can definitely help you out with the absinthe because that's right down his alley, man. He loves that kind of stuff. And I love watching those reenactments and stuff. And they dress in period clothing and try to use stuff that was available at the time to prepare and distill and very interesting, very cool shit, man. I dig it, love it. Well, Gerald, yeah, for bitters, interesting stuff, man. Yeah, you can. You know, I don't know if it would affect the flavor, you know, how much, it would change the flavor of anything, but we generally ran the same thing over and over and over and over again. So we weren't really mixing, that with a lot of brandies. I didn't do a lot of brandies back then. It was mostly just corn, um, and other grains sometimes. But sure, I mean, a lot of people like the flavor, that sweetness added to it. Gives it an extra element of depth, and some people would say it's the worst thing they ever put in their mouth. You never know, it's just some people would like it, some people wouldn't, but I don't see why not, you know. Um, I knew you saying hops and not hoops. I know. I don't know if you'd lose brandy flavor or just add something to the flavor. I don't know, maybe a little of both. Yeah, that auto erection is a bitch. Every time I spell Clint Taurus out, it says clitoris. It's funny. Yeah, you got to do the welding, man. Yeah. Am I that far behind? But I'm telling you, if you want to get a bunch of hits, just get you a stick welder and do a shitty job. Let it splatter everywhere and go without a shirt on and wear flip flops and, you know, try to, squint your eyes instead of using a mask, man. They'll just tear you up. Try to just shut your eyes instead of having a mask on, man. You'll get the more comments. Oh hell no, brother. I don't want anybody. I love it. I do get behind though, because I get kind of long winded in some of my rants, and I tend to get off topic a little bit sometimes, and just you never know where the conversation is going to end up. I can start talking about yeast and nutrients. Next thing you know, I'm talking about feeding deer in the woods or something. It's crazy. Yep, 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 yep. Time again. I need to see Jeff again. That hadn't seen him on there in a while. Absolutely. Yeah, got a lot of knowledgeable help here, man. Clint helps me a lot and got a lot of other knowledgeable people here. And I'd like to think that we've helped teach them some things, and a lot of them bring a lot of knowledge, from other places. And, you know, uh, and some, probably worked in distilleries before as well. But yeah, we got a good crowd here, man. I like it. I enjoy getting in here every couple times a week and chatting with everybody and helping the newbies and chatting with you guys. Yeah, the beards of knowledge. Yeah, it's a good time. I enjoy it. Yeah, we talk about that a lot of times too. And eventually on in the DIY shine and stuff page, I wanna do the DIY shine and shine and survival techniques, or that sounds good, doesn't it? DIY shine and survival techniques. But and surviving, being able to live off the land and forage, because there's a lot of plants out there that we consider weeds that were once a food source, and a major food source, and a food source that's actually better than in many cases than what we eat today, but they just weren't as easily grown or weren't as efficient, or they didn't, produce as well, and it cost too much to grow, or took too long to grow, and a lot of other things. So, other vegetables, and kind of pushed them to the side. And there may be some better alternatives to a lot of things. There are a lot of better alternatives to things out there that just didn't grow as well or as fast or produce as much money. So it's an economic, decision, not a nutritional decision to go with one over the other. So there's but getting books, I can't recommend enough. Learning how to make shine, is one thing, wine and all that, but making shine for, an antiseptic, or things of that nature, cleaning, um, you know, disinfecting. There's a lot of uses for it, and getting books that have pictures of a lot of the edible plants. I mean, there's a book I've got to find it because I talk about it so often. I want to show it. It's on one of my bookshelves back behind me, but all the edible plants in North America, and it shows pictures of them, and close-ups, and it shows also pictures of the ones that look just very similar that you don't want. So kind of stay away from those. Period. I don't care if it's one of them's good for me and the other one's not. I'm not. I'm too scared I might be getting the wrong one. So, but there's a lot of good things that you can go out and forage for that we may have to someday, and teach them, this younger generation, how to can, and make jams and jellies, and put up foods, and can meat and vegetables. It might be a pretty good thing to learn, especially the direction it looks like we're headed in the world. Oregon, that's not an outsider. You're close to our buddy up here in Canada, British Columbia. Yeah, we get them from all over. We get them from we get people from all over the world. We get people from New Zealand watching. We get people from England, Scotland, Canada. I'm trying to think of all the different countries. A lot of different countries. Yeah, I know. Oregon and Illinois, y'all can battle it out to see who has the most wokeness in their. Don't get me going. Now, don't get me started on that. I don't like to talk about politics because I might end up pissing somebody off, and I don't want to do that. So let's just keep it on alcohol, getting drunk, and foraging for and canning and all that good stuff. I tell you, I hate to talk about it. Yeah, yeah. There's I have to find this book and show it to y'all. Types of yeast is extremely important. Nothing tells me that somebody doesn't know what they're talking about more than when you start talking about yeast, and they look at you and say, it doesn't matter what kind of yeast you use, they're all the same. It's like that screaming, I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. you know, and a lot of people do it, and for some, and I should say, for some people, it probably doesn't make a lot of difference. They make a thin mash, and they mix heads and tails and everything together, and drink that. And for somebody that does it, I'm not going to knock them. I know them. I know people that done it that way for years, and not four shots, mind you, but just heads, and they'll get into the heads further than I ever would, further into the tails than I ever would, and just mix it all together in a big pot, and proof it down, and bottle it up, and throw some fruit in there to try to flavor it up a little bit and sell it, and people buy that shit left and right. And so for somebody that making liquor like that, yeast probably doesn't make a whole lot of difference. But yeast makes all the difference in the world. Especially if you're making wine or beer, or a good brandy, and want some good results and good flavors and stuff and different profiles. Yeast makes all the difference in the world. Yeah, we got more and more Kentucky boy in here, and old Tammy's in Kentucky. We got quite a few Kentuckians in here. And we got some people from South Kakalaki too. Hey, Jamie. What's up, brother? Yeah, I mean, ketchup is fine. I mean, it works just fine, and it's a paste, and it'll stay there, and it works. It's just expensive, and make sure you get all that vinegar out. But yeah, it works fine. I'm not saying it's ineffective. It's just costly and less efficient. I like citric acid than much as anything. Yeah, Frankfurt. Yeah, it's central Kentucky. It's pretty area, a little hilly there. It's nice. It's nice. It's our capital, and yeah, I visited the recruiters. I guess back in the '80s, I was going to go to the Iraq Desert Storm, and none of them would have me with my with my police record, and all the DUIs and PIs I had, and a dislocated shoulder. All four branches. Said, "No, I don't think so." I wanted to so bad, man. I want to be a sniper, and they'd have had a good sniper. Pretty decent shot. Most of my buddies that were in the military, we go out and shoot, and I shot against some in IDPA, and I smoke them all. But I had some buddies that were in the military. We go out and shoot, and they're like, you know, we walk off 300 yards, no scope, and you can barely see the target. They ain't even hitting the target, and I'm hitting three just like that, from each other. They're like, man, you shoot like that, you'd been 18 for sure. They'd have swept you right off the range, and you'd have gone to specialty training, and I'd have been a sniper for sure. But they didn't want me. I was too wild, and I guess with my shoulder, I couldn't throw overhand like a nade very far or something like that. I could have sidearmed it, uh, but no, they didn't. They didn't want nothing to do with me. Yeah, I like getting that outside patina on there. Keeping that inside. You know, but once you get a good oxidation on there, a good layer, it's a little harder for it to turn and patina and turn green and get that greenness on there, that oxidant buildup. So doesn't hurt. No, actually, they're good for brandy as well because a lot of brandies they'll produce those same sulfides. Actually, I was in a discussion. I don't know what format. I don't know. I might have been on YouTube. It was something that somebody posted something about, and it was a bunch of sophistos talking. And they really didn't know a whole lot of what they were talking about. And they were talking about buying distilleries and doing all this. And so I started answering some questions like, "Wow, really?" And I'm like, "Man, this person's getting ready to buy a distillery, and they don't know any more than that." Jeez, oh Pete, I hope they hire somebody good. But yeah, there's a lot of sulfites, and it's just a byproduct of the fermentation process, and it gets it from it's in your plants and vegetables, and fruits and vegetables and stuff. So it's natural, but it does, you know, Stressed yeast and certain types of fruits and vegetables tend to produce more, and stressed yeast will produce more. Yeah, one more cheese. We'll have to stop when this gets to, we're almost 11. Damn, we've been doing these 3 hour sessions, man. And as time goes by so quick, it's fun hanging out and chatting with everybody and answering questions, and love getting the beginners in here. Seltzer water, adult seltzer water. I had a teacher at Roland Burns. He taught at Morehead State, and great guy. I took a class. It was a high level. It was 500 level class, a conservation of natural resources class, and a great class and very knowledgeable guy. And he liked to call his beers sudsy pops. Sudsy pops. That made me think about him. I don't think he's with us any longer, but he was a good guy and a good teacher. Very 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 knowledgeable. Well, let's see. So what are we talking about here? I might have missed a question. Oh, for the copper pots. Yeah, I mean they're good for the brandies as well. I've like my plum wines. I've gotten plums tend to create a little bit more sulfur than a lot of other fruits, and dark grapes create create some sulfurs. Yeah, yeah, cleaning up in the vapor path is definitely the most effective way, and you get a lot of surface area with that mesh. With a pot, you only have so much liquid coming in contact with that boiler, right? So unless you have copper plumbing too, and you got some more contact, there's really not enough just in the boiler to do it because not enough makes contact. So you got the caps and make a contact there, but the majority of it gets put forced by. But when you force that all that vapor through a copper mesh, it really helps because they bond to that copper pretty readily. That all the sulfur it bonds to copper real well. I might have a little Scotch Irish in me, coming from McCoys and McCalls and Scots. That's the three of the last names out of six in my tree. We out of eight. But yeah, mostly Scotch Irish, a little bit of English and German. English, German, and Scotch Irish is pretty much all my ancestry. There was a full blood Cherokee somewhere, maybe 5 or 6 generations back, but in the distilling, most of your fermentations are going to contain it, but you really it's hard to remove the sulfites from the ferment. And copper is probably not a good thing to ferment in because we found that copper is also an antimicrobial, kind of like cinnamon and some other things. But that's one of the reasons that they use copper in plumbing is because you won't have a lot of bacterial things building up in your lines because they can't survive when they in contact with that copper. So I know a lot of people use it for their yeast drinks, and call it the copper donnas and all that. But and it may be, there may be some symbiosis. There may be that copper kills some of the yeast that's being stored in there, and that makes a food for some of the living yeast, and it's just kind of a circle of life kind of thing. So that may be the case, and that may be a beneficial thing. So I don't know. Yeah, well, that and there wasn't a lot of stainless way back in the day, so um, there were a lot of different alloys and I mean, you look at some of the stuff that they used to drink with. I mean, they used to drink out of leaded cups and stuff, and like pewter, leaded pewter, and a lot of high toxic metals that they used to use for drinking. And we now find that a lot of wealthy, well, like aristocrats back in the day died because they were all that high class and highfalutin with their little pinkies up while they drank out of leaded cups and shit. So, but copper was easily malleable, is easily worked. It's easily soldered instead of welded. You don't have to weld, and you can just solder it together. And it was also, they understood a lot about biology and stuff a lot sooner than a lot of people realize, they and even before they knew the science of why and how the copper removed a lot of sulfites, they just knew that when you distilled it in it, it was better because it didn't have those sulfites. And so, you have old Tuck over here, old Friar Tuck, he was making his wine and brandies and in copper, running it through copper steels, and his had a little bit better flavor than somebody else's that was running it through some other metal or but wasn't a whole lot back in the old days. There wasn't a lot of metals and oil drums and stuff like that to work with. So a lot of times, hammering out some copper and metalsmiths hammering out copper and making steels out of it was um, one of the easiest ways to do it. Yeah, and two, the even heating, helps too. Not hot spots and good even heating. But yeah, yeah, they metallurgy's been something that's going on. They had some high nickel steel, and these swords and stuff that some of these Japanese, made that still aren't rusty today, and they're hundreds of years old, and they high nickel and steel and stuff. But it was, getting something like that hammered into it, or made into a steel would have been, pretty difficult. But there was a lot of pot, probably cast, a lot of cast, stuff was done. There's a lot of different things that were used in the past that would probably not be very beneficial. Today we've got stainless and copper, two of the best things. So yeah, and I would say, drinking out of the copper cups and putting copper mesh into post distillate would help even remove some in there, if it were that bad. And if you had that kind of a copper allergy, at least running it through some of the, you know, make a filter out of it and run it through it or store it in copper cups or vessels would definitely help remove more if you had that allergy. That's awesome. Rabbit food. That's funny. Damn, how can I be half hour behind? God bless. Let me go through here. Yeah, I have to Google every once in a while, man, because I want to give out the best information, and contrary to popular belief, I don't know everything, hardly ever, and I don't profess to. A lot of people, have too much pride to say they had to Google an answer, but shit, I don't know it all. Hell, I wished I did. But I like learning just like everybody else. We're all here to learn, and y'all ask a lot of good questions. Sometimes it gets me thinking, and that's why I get on there because I want to know too. Hell, I can help with a lot of it, but I can't answer them all. I mean, I don't know about what kind of polysaccharides might be in a mushroom. Hell, I never even thought about it, even when I was on them. That's funny. Oh, you can watch it again later. You can pick right up. Yeah, chitin. Titan, I think, is that Saturn moon? Maybe. I'm sorry, I'm just getting this. I think Saturn. Let me look and see. I'm googling again because I think it's Saturn. Yeah, Titan is the largest moon of Saturn. Okay, I know. I know Jupiter has a lot of them. What is it, 13 moons or 9 moons? Yep, I'm googling that too because I can't remember. I once learned every bit of that shit and forgotten it. 95 officially recognized. I know damn good well it wasn't 95 when I was in school. God damn. 95 moons now they call fucking from Jupiter. Man, back in the 70s and early late 70s, it wasn't 95 moons. God bless. Man, I'm gonna have to throw some of them old science books away, ain't I? 95 moons. Did y'all know that? 95. Man, that's crazy. Atlas. Did I say Titan? Atlas. Yes, Atlas. I think I did that the other day. I think in a conversation, I think I called it 3-Eye Titan. I bet people laughing at my ass. Yeah, Atlas. But yeah, it was on the other side of the sun, and there was some mass coronal ejections a few days ago. Actually, I think it was the 21st or 2nd. Am I that far behind? My goodness. Yeah, I'd say it would. Actually, we've actually ground up my mushrooms and put them in mixed drinks before and partied on it. And yes, we told everybody they were in there. I wouldn't do that to somebody, but they knew what was in it. Yeah, I wouldn't try to do that to somebody. Actually, I did one time. I'm not even gonna tell that story. But it was a dude aggravated the shit out of me. Does it? I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure, and I googled it. I know it doesn't. The melting point or breaking down, it takes pretty high temperature, but I wasn't sure exactly what temperature it denatured. But I can't believe I'm that far behind still. The I need to stay up. And y'all talking about AI, and I was talking about that a while back. I'm sorry I get behind. I'm getting caught up. I'm not seeing any questions. Just a lot of commentary that I'm reading as I go. Peyote, yeah. Blackberry shine and wine. Both damn good. I tell you, old Sandman makes some good blackberry wine or shine. Some of the best blackberry shine I've had, I believe, came from that boy. He makes good stuff. Pretty good dude. He makes good liquor too. Yeah, a lot of people just buy box wine. They don't even bother fermenting it. They'll just go out and buy a box of wine, put it in their Vever and run that shit through and have some good brandy. Yeah, that's good to know. I know you can overdo it too. I mean, I've read a little bit about the absinthe and I've watched the stuff, but I don't know enough to really talk about it. So I'm not, I generally, when topics come up that I don't know a lot about, I tend to get quiet and just listen and try to learn, about it. And I know a little bit about it, but I couldn't give you a list of the different spices and plants and things that went into it. So I'm not even right. A lot of people try to bullshit and act like they know. I'm just being straight up. I haven't done it. I don't know a lot about it, but I do know a lot of people that when they try it their first time, they really fuck it up by getting the ratios of the botanicals off and make some really horrendous tasting stuff. So, but I will. I think I'll do it one of these days for sure. But before I do, I'm gonna get up with Alan Bishop and try to eliminate a lot of mistakes that a lot of beginners make their first time, because he's pretty knowledgeable about a lot of that stuff. Man, he knows a lot about the history and different distillates from all over the world. I mean, I know a lot about the science, and I can go over all the science with you about pretty much everything. But the history and origins of a lot of different distillates. Very knowledgeable guy, great guy too, good guy, real good guy. Farm boy, country boy, father, and distiller, grew up making shine. Yeah, good guy. Never fooled making beer. Never, other than just my mashes, and I've drank quite a bit of the mashes. Actually, I like some of my mashes better than a lot of the damn beer you buy in the store. But the only beer I really drank that I liked was like the dark beer in France and in Europe. The warm dark beer that had pretty high alcohol content. It had a lot of body and it was just different. It wasn't like a blonde American beer at all. It wasn't anything like it. Yeah. Yeah, I'm telling you, man. I've seen it all, and one dude was wielding flip flops, man, and there's probably 300 comments on just the flip flops alone, man. It was hilarious. I like reading. I should get a life and not read a lot of these comments, but and read what all the trolls read. But it's a lot of entertainment, man. There's some stupid fuckers out there that just it's fucking entertaining as hell, man. I like watching and reading about it. But yeah, if you want to get a bunch of hits and you want to get your big channel going, just go buy you a cheap little stick welder and talk like you're a professional. Read up on it enough to know you're talking. Just splatter weld, talk about what a fine bead you're putting down. And I'm telling you, you'll get 500,000 hits. Yeah, we got a bunch in the Northwest. All right. Frank Thompson with a question. All right. What's going on, brother? Hadn't talked to you in a minute. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, if you don't want it being dry, but I don't know if it'll start affecting the alcohol at all. But I know once all the sugar's gone, there shouldn't be too much more that it can do. So I think eventually it'll probably just kill off, of lack of things to eat. But let's see. And yes, some strains of lactobacillus can consume or metabolize alcohol. So, and they can live in alcohol rich environments and even break it down to some extent. So, yes, you can let lacto go too long. I was thinking, I'd read somewhere in the past that it could actually consume alcohol, and it can, sure can. And not consuming it, but changing it. And let's see, it's Lactobacillus rhamnosus. So there's different strains that can, absolutely. So yeah, you can let the lacto go too long in your alcohol. I was thinking that I'd read somewhere before that lacto would actually, once the sugars would gone, would do that. And I was, no, will they die off? And then maybe I did read somewhere that it can consume alcohol, and it actually can, some types. I think they were finding out that bee venom has some anti-cancer properties too. Pretty interesting read. But yeah, tinctures, that's another thing, as far as for future and for survival and stuff. Learn how to make these tinctures with a lot of different plants. Absolutely. There's a lot of people that and I don't want to step on their toes. A lot of them are friends of mine that have classes and distilling classes and stuff. They probably hate me for doing this, and I'm sorry. I don't make a penny doing this. I don't get any money from YouTube or I run this on the militia channel. If they get any money, it just goes back into paying StreamYard. Probably still wouldn't even pay enough to pay for that. And if Billy makes a little off of it, more power to him. He's the one that pays for the StreamYard. So, but I've never made the first dime doing it. Wouldn't ask for any money, and I enjoy doing it. But I do have several friends and very knowledgeable friends that do teach classes, and I'll recommend them. If people want to go and get the hands-on experience. I mean, we can sit here and talk all day till you blue in the face, but for a lot of people, doing it hands-on, you learn a lot more. And the intimate, gathering and being together and with other people and hanging out and adds a little bit to it, and having the cookouts and everything that they do, and getting to meet the distillers, and getting to become friends with them. It means a lot, and having somebody in the future that you can call and ask questions, and So, it's invaluable, and there's a lot of, Amanda, good friend, she does it. Um, I think Bruiser's getting ready to start doing it. I know Alan's, going to start doing it. I think Sean Rigsby, is thinking about doing it as well, and wish them all the best. Any way I can help them, I will. But um, not everybody can afford to do that. And for those that can't, that's what we're here for. And I will promote them, till my dying day. They're all great people, and I want them, to succeed and do well. But at the same time, I'm gonna keep up with the free show, and they, I don't do hands on here, and so you don't get to physically see stuff and watch it being done and stuff, and so for a lot of people, doing the hands-on things and just being there with others, and it's kind of a vacation, get out of the house and go spend a weekend somewhere, and some of them offer camping and cookouts and a lot of other fun stuff, and absolutely, I may go do Amanda's sometime just to hang out with her and Jay. They're good. I like them both. They're good people. May go up and hang out with Alan and aggravate the shit out of him for a while too, but maybe I'll maybe I'll have to work off the tuition, help him work up there. But yeah, appreciate it. Just share it with your friends. Anybody you know, we enjoy it. The more the merrier. We've got like as you see, we've got. If I can't handle all the questions because I'm so damn long winded and I get busy talking about stuff and off on tangents, and Clint will probably answer 2 or 3 questions to my one, but and some of the other guys in here help answer too. But I was thinking about starting a group on Facebook, and I've been pushing the idea around and thinking about it for well over a year now, since I actually before I started this, is doing a questions only page. And it's when I made the Distilling 101 page, that's actually I've never promoted yet or pushed. There's actually a page out there, Distilling 101, and I may make that question only format, so you don't get a lot of trolls, trolling people. Oh, it's the stupidest question I ever heard. Well, you don't ask that, you shouldn't even be. You get so much of that shit. Nobody likes that. And nobody likes somebody coming in there giving out false information either, and bullshit. Then you can tell, when you know something, you can tell who's bullshitting pretty quickly because it's quite obvious. So I was thinking about doing a question only format, and me and Clint, maybe a few other very, very knowledgeable, distillers and stuff, answer questions and field questions in there and just make it question only. You're there only to ask questions, just like in class. You either raise your hand, ask a question, or learn from other questions that get answered. So you basically, you can scroll down. Oh, I've got a question about this, and you can search these pages for yeast. Just type in yeast, and it'll find all the different times yeast was mentioned, and stuff. So nice for that too. So once people learn how to search and use that search field, that becomes very beneficial. But I've been thinking about doing just question only format. You're in the group, but you're there only to answer questions. You're not there to contribute anything. Glad you're here, but ask the questions or just read, and learn from the others. But so many of these groups have people that, and I know them because a lot of times it was like just 6 months ago they were the ones in here asking all these questions, and then all 6 months later, well, they're the biggest authority in the world, and out there spreading false, and I'm not saying that they're lying or anything like that. It's just that they learned from somewhere and they learned wrong. So maybe they read it on Reddit or got it from distiller.org or someplace that sometimes there's great information on it, sometimes there's, well, I shouldn't say distiller.org. They do a fair job of keeping some of the bullshit out because they'll call that out pretty quickly. But there's still a lot of misinformation, especially on Facebook, a lot of the groups, a lot of old wise tales, and a lot of misinformation out there. So I was thinking about maybe just doing a question only thing, um, but we've got the DIY page, and anybody wants to ask a question, they can go there. Moonshine Militia page, they can go there and get their questions answered. And if anybody ever says anything to you, and belittles you or gives you shit on either group, let me know. We'll send them packing. We don't put up with that. That's the reason both groups were created. Back in the early days when we got on here, you couldn't say anything without 20 trolls or 20 idiots, commenting on your questions. And, you'd have to read, there'd be 15 different answers, totally different answers to one simple question. And, that might have been two right out of the whole 13 or 15 that answered. It was just a clusterfuck, and so many trolls, that were know-it-alls and trying to show, how far they could piss by belittling somebody that didn't know as much as them or something like that. And we just couldn't stand it anymore. So we decided, I can't stand to read this shit anymore. We call them down for it, and the admins and moderators wouldn't do anything. So we're like, fuck it, we're out of here. We're gonna make our own group, and it wasn't anything against a lot of the people that did the pages. It's just that they got so big and they were so busy doing real life stuff that they didn't have the opportunity and time to admin it, and they didn't want to piss anybody off by booting them because they're in business. So, we created those groups just for that purpose. So anytime you got any questions, you can, come here 2 days a week, or you can jump on those pages and there's going to be some knowledgeable people answer you. And if there's bullshit, we'll call it out, and a lot of times there's a lot of different right answers to a question. So, we don't necessarily say that's wrong. A lot of times it's a good, better, best practice, or an okay practice, something I wouldn't do, but I guess you can and still get alcohol out of it, but it's not going to be good. So it's not necessarily a wrong answer. It's just that, it's going to taste like shit if you do it that way, but you're still going to get alcohol. So technically it's not wrong, but it's just not going to be good. So we're going to try to, I don't know, maybe we just do DIY like that. Just ask you questions, and we'll try to limit the answers to individuals that know. And we've never had a big problem with a lot of people, trying to answer stuff that really didn't know what they're talking about. And if they do, we'll say, that sounds pretty good, but you might want to try it this way. Or if somebody asks a fairly simple question and you see me click like or put a heart on it, that means that I agree with that answer. And I'm not going to take the time to tell you the same thing. And, you can't ask one question and 40 people tell you the same thing. It's just how many times you need the right answer. So sometimes I'll just put a big blue check on it or a heart on it. And that means that, I agree with that answer. I'm glad you like it here, and invite, if you got any friends and people you want to invite over, hell, bring them on. We enjoy the company and questions for sure. Sam Thayer's. I don't think that. I'm not sure. I'm gonna look up my book, Mike. I'll find it this week, and I think I've got one on medicinal herbs and stuff too that I'm gonna try to find, and some holistic medicine type stuff, and those both are really good books to have. Everybody should have that, especially the food and foraging, because people people have a false sense of security in our society because of their normalcy bias. And that means that you live a certain way for a certain period of time. You just expect things to be the same way tomorrow, and you don't ever anticipate change. It's just everything's normal. And we think everybody all over the world and in third world countries and everywhere, they're just like us. They live the same way we do. We're all just people, right? No, not at all. So I'm not going to get political, but it's it'll be good for people to learn a lot about this shit, because you never know what's going to happen in our world, and it could get turned upside down pretty quickly. We see just a few natural disasters, big snows, and all of a sudden stores don't get stocked for a week or two or three, and you know hopefully you got some food stored up and some rations and some beans and things put away for those kind of times, because if you don't, I mean, you're going to get out and walk through the snow and try to forage in the snow. You're going to try to walk to the store that's the shelves have been picked dry. And remember, during COVID, it just, we live in crazy times. So it's good for people to prepare. didn't eat too much of it. Yeah. Yeah, it will. Yeah, it'll eat some. I'm, again, I think Clint, like you said, it didn't really eat a lot. I've never let lacto go, but I did read somewhere in the past, that it did consume alcohol, but I don't know to what extent. I know that it consumes sugar a lot more than probably alcohol, but it can metabolize it. So yeah, we may do that. I know Clint's into the yellow label and the goji and a lot of the different fungal yeasts and stuff, and yeah, it'd probably be a good idea, to sit and do a special show maybe, on different yeasts and 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 certain yeast and what normally they do best. It's like the Lalvin D47. A lot of people say that's the best yeast for like a mead, and like a Red Star Premier Rouge. A lot of people say that's one of the best for red wines, or Premier Blanc for your white wines, or EC 1118 for your champagnes. And there's a lot of specific yeast, to Quebec yeast for your whiskeys, and a lot of different yeasts for different purposes. And like a yellow label. I don't know. I guess for cold mashing, in areas where you know maybe it's easier just to cold mash with, or I know a lot of like sakis and rice work well with the yellow label. I think that might be able to, what it was actually designed for. Yeah, Frank, I need to give me a shout sometime tomorrow or next day, brother. I haven't talked to you in a while. Yeah, we got it from all over. Yeah, yeah, I had mine wasn't childhood injuries. Mine was well, I guess my dislocated shoulder was when I was young. I did it while snow skiing when I was a senior in high school. It was after football, thank God. So I got to finish football out, but kind of prevented me from playing college ball and prevented me from going in the military as well. So I made all conference, and I was the only person that made all conference in the whole conference that didn't get a scholarship to play football, and it's because of my shoulder. But yeah, I could have probably played at some college somewhere, mid major somewhere. But you know, tell you what, I may not be in the military, but if the shit hits the fan, I'll be toe to toe with whoever helping them. National Guard, ICE, cops, whoever. You know, definitely support them, clean the fucking streets up. I like to think that too, brother. I appreciate that. Me and Clint, we spend a lot of time in here every week helping people out and talking. And actually, I may bring Clint on for an episode. I know I'm not going to do any more episodes with like, co-hosts and stuff like that, because it's just ended up, I was talking to Clint about it. I'd love to have him on, but it's like every time in the past, me and Roger, me and Marjorie, Rock, and me and Mark and Roger, it always end up with fussing and, just like brothers. You can't get them together. Family, you can't work together. And anytime you get people together like that, they just start, rubbing the grains, and it just, I don't want to lose any friends over it. But, um, may bring him on to talk about the yeast thing. And I'd like to have Clint, um, maybe for some episodes that I'm not able to do. So instead of just saying, well, we're not going to be able to do it next week or next Wednesday or Saturday, I'm going to a festival, or because I go to a lot of festivals, or, I'm not feeling good this week. Clint might be able to take over if he's able to do that. Maybe we could do something like that. But, as far as co-hosting and doing it together, I don't know. I'm an asshole, I guess. I just piss everybody off. But I don't know. It just like going into business with family. And this never works out, and everybody ends up mad at each other. And I don't want that with anybody anymore. I've dealt with it twice already, and me and Mark patched it up. Roger, I don't know, we kind of still bumpy, and I don't know. There's still some issues there. I wish there wasn't, but it's just always happens. It's just every show. It always ends up that way. And I don't want to. And I like Clint real well, man. He's one of my besties. We talk a lot, and I'd hate for that, because he's such a great guy, man. He's tell you some of the best stories ever. He's a great guy. So, but I may bring him on to do like a yeast thing, or something like that, a special, and maybe have him if he's willing to maybe do some episodes when I'm not going to be able to be here. But I just like to keep it, individual, and not two people talking over each other back and forth. And I know Clint, not wouldn't do that, but eventually, it ends up that way. And if you ever watch the shit show, good God, it's like 8, 10 people all talking at the same time, and nobody cares if anybody can understand anything that's being said. They're going to get what they need to say out, and it's just. And I talk a lot, I don't ever shut up, so it's hard for a co-host to get a word in, and I'm sure it pisses them off too, and probably part of the problem. But that's the way it goes. But yeah, if Clint can, when he set up for it, maybe help fill in for me when I'm not able to make it, and maybe do some specials, episodes together. Yep, an old ginger boy. Yep. That's awesome, brother. I know I'm 45 minutes ago. It's funny. It is. Let's see. That's Tim. You said that 40 minutes ago. All right. Shit, I'm rolling now. I'm scrolling. Yeah, we all just a bunch of hillbillies and hickerbillies. That's what my fiance's daughter calls hillbillies hickerbillies. That was a funny term for them that they use in Florida. And she said it affectionately. She wasn't being derogatory. It was just kind of funny. And I don't mind. I am an old hick and hickerbilly. I know a lot of AI will flag that as hate speech or derogatory speech. I guess that's like the N word to somebody from the country or something. I don't know. It doesn't bother me. I'm old hillbilly. Oh, if you're still talking about that lacto, run that shit. Yeah, yeah, it does, man. You tell it. The more I drink, the redder my face gets, and my nose too, man. It'll get redder as I go. And I usually talk a little more too. And here it's probably almost midnight. We're still going. See. All right, I'm scrolling fast now. Yeah, I used to. I'm allergic to sulfa-based drugs. You know, I learned that when I was a kid. They don't have as many as they did back then, but yeah, I was. That was one thing my mom always said. Yeah, you're allergic to sulfa. I guess they gave me some when I was a kid. That was a sulfa-based drug, and uh, and it didn't sit well with me. I also know that typhoid flu vaccine almost killed me. I literally was going into convulsions. If I'd gotten to the hospital 5 minutes later, I'd have died. You know, that was a bad. I'll tell that story sometime. As after, well, I'll tell you, as after a flood in eastern Kentucky, Pike County, it floods a lot there. But this was a real bad flood, and Red Cross was there, and I was volunteering, you know, and helping and cleaning up. And I was a teen. I was probably 13, 14, and I was helping out and you know, cleaning and carrying stuff. And the Red Cross was there, and they had a bunch of buses, Greyhounds. And they were going to deliver food and medicine and stuff all over, you know, the county and stuff. So I was going to do that, and they said, "Well, before you do any work like this, you know, make sure you get a tetanus and a typhoid flu vaccine." So I got me a tetanus shot and a typhoid flu shot, and loading the bus up, and just started getting real uneasy, feeling and shaky. And I was like, "Man, I don't feel good," you know, and getting a little bit more shaky and just kind of trembling, you know, just not convulsions yet, just kind of, you know, just shivering, like almost like you cold shiver, and just wasn't feeling good. And I'm glad I took the time to load it up and load the bus up. And I'm like, you know, and it's right there at the courthouse in Pikeville. And I'm like, well, I don't feel good. I don't guess I'm gonna go out and hand out the food and stuff. I think I'm just going to help out here a bit, loading buses and stuff. And it's just a few minutes later, he's like, I was just uncontrollably shaking. I'm like, something wrong here. So I went back to the health department that was giving out the typhoid flu vaccines and the shots. Dr. Fox, a lady there, very brilliant lady. She just passed away a couple of years ago. Wonderful person, helped out a lot of people in Eastern Kentucky. Um, was a very brilliant doctor and lived, you know, did live poor, but she didn't live extravagant as she could because she gave so much and did so much for free and helped people for free. And you know, true Mount woman. But I went in there and she's, oh Lord, and she knew immediately I was having a, you know, allergic reaction to this vaccine. And she's like, by the time she got that and got a deputy, man, I was starting to, you know, convulse. I was going into, you know, bad convulsions, and she got me in the back of that deputy, you know, sheriff's car deputy, and they didn't have time to wait for an ambulance. They put me in a car immediately and drove me straight to the hospital, and they got it out of my system barely. And they said if I'd been there 5 minutes later, I'd have died. It would have just shut me down, I guess. So you never know how quickly it can go. So, but yeah, I was allergic to sulfa-based drugs as well. That's again sulfa-based drugs, and I'm off on some tangent. All right, brother. Good seeing you, man. Give me a shout. And that was 40 minutes ago. Damn. I was almost caught it. Oh, I know what's happening. See this little thing on the right, that little thing, it gets close to the bottom. You think, oh, I'm about caught up. And then you get close to it and it goes, zoop. That's what's happening right now. Let me get past all this. Because I don't want to just scroll past everything. I see a lot of chat between you guys, and that's cool. And I'm making sure there's not questions that I missed or Clint might have missed. I don't want you to shut up. That's what you're here for, man. This is good discussions. I'll be damn watch that thing go up as soon as I get down close to the bottom. Bing, there it goes. Look at that. Damn it. I'm just scrolling. Wow. And was it that long ago I talked about bee venom? Or you just bringing it back up? God Almighty. Yeah. Well, it's 11:45. All right, I'm just going to scroll to the bottom. I'm going to miss a lot of good stuff. I may have to. I'll be one of those person watching it later. I've never watched one of my streams again, but I may have to end it and come back and read through it, just catch up and see everything. Yeah, it's not about what's left or right. Well, it's not about Republican or Democrat. It's about what's right. And neither one of them are without fault. That's why I don't like. It's like I said last week. When talking about a lot of the issues of the day, a lot of what the left is having problems with now is something that they preached 10, 15 years ago. A lot of the things that the left are doing now is things that they were against, or for, 15 years ago, like open borders. They wanted to bring in more workers, well, this is getting political, but back in the day, the Republicans wanted to bring in more workers for the factories and have cheap workers because it helped, the economy, cheap work, and they didn't really care, and everything's changed. Everything's kind of changed politically, and used to the Democrats preached against it. Hell, Obama deported 12 million people, and now all of a sudden, just you know, 8 years later, they want to keep them, and it's because they're losing their voter base. But I'm not going to get no, don't want to go there. But I don't. I don't go left or right. I just try to stay, common sense, and there don't seem to be a lot of that on either side these days. And but there's a lot of things that are right and wrong being done, and people just don't see it, and a lot of people are brainwashed by the media, and divided by the media, and it's like we say, when magicians do something, they divert your attention with one hand while the other hand does something, and that's what the media does. They divert our attention while other shit's happening. Yeah. All right, y'all. 11:45. I gotta go kiss my honey good night before she goes to bed. She went up a little bit ago. But anyway, it's been a great night. Another great episode. Love getting in here and talking with y'all. And hell, maybe someday we'll just do a different day or something. We'll pick and talk about politics. But it seems like when you talk about, I thought that would be a good thing the other day. We did it kind of in the shit show, where we get a little bit political and talking. And it's strange that you just assume that everybody feels the same way you do about things because it's just kind of logical and common sense. But I'm not going to say anything bad just because somebody disagrees with me. But I think most of my beliefs and everything are all not necessarily faith based, but on what's good and what's right, and what's best for our country, and there shouldn't be an R or D that comes along with those thoughts, so but it seemed to upset a lot of people, and there was a lot of opposing views that I didn't realize that most of the community had. I thought most of us pretty much thought the same way, and I found out real quickly that we don't. I'm okay with that. I'm 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 all for people having, the ability to think and do as they want. That's what this country's based on. But so I don't think Yeah, better show me sweetheart some love. But I just don't understand, and I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to do anything about politics or religion because it's there's just people that enjoy the show that it might taint. They might be, I enjoyed this damn show and this guy until he started talking about that. Now I can't stand it, and I don't want that. So I just want to keep it, light. And if y'all want to talk about that in the chat, that's perfectly fine. I'm not going to delete chats, unless people start getting to the point where they're cussing each other out and using some terminology or some things that might get me banned on Facebook or YouTube, some hate speech or something. But I enjoy talking about it, and I just don't understand why everybody doesn't believe the same way, because it's just what I think is right and best. But I guess everybody doesn't see it the same way. So, but that's sad that our country's come to that. I hate to see it. But everybody have a good night, and I'm one last toast. And y'all have a great weekend, and we will see y'all Monday. And I will, for those that are wondering, I will have that all grain how to. Now this is for beginners, so if you're advanced and you're like, well, why wouldn't you do this? Well, I'm trying to gear this towards a first timer or somebody that's just getting started and doesn't, know how to step mash and do all this. And I may do one that's not even using malts anymore, because most people are using the high temp amylase and the liquid glucose, or powder. So, I may say, well, if you're using malted grains, check the diastatic. Here's how you do it. And, teach them how to use 30 and all that to figure out the diastatics and how much you need. And so I may add that to it, but, I'm trying to keep it simple, and it can be very complex if you want to make it that way. But I want to change the structure on, and how it's written, because some people said the last one was kind of hard to follow, because I didn't capitalize at the beginning, and it looks like I'm making sentences without capitalizing in the beginning. And I was just trying to break it up in kind of steps. So I think I'm going to try to word it a little differently and make it look a little more coherent for some people, But I'll do that. I'll try to get that done this week, and I'll find that book in the herb books and the edible plant book, because it's really good one. But basically, any good old plant book that'll show you pictures, lots of pictures. You want lots of pictures for identification purposes. But we'll get into all that anyway. Y'all have a great weekend, and I guess we'll see you Wednesday, or tune in Monday. I'm going to be on Still Talking with Big Easy, Uncle Joey, and Sean Rigsby. I'm not sure how many of them will be there, who will be there, but I'll be on there Monday, and they're on YouTube and Facebook and everything. So check them out. And they at 9 Eastern. I was thinking it was 8 at first, but it'll be 9 Eastern. So I'll be on there Monday, chatting with those guys. They're great, good people. I love Ian and the Big Easy and Rigsby and Uncle Joey, man. Old Uncle Joey's awesome. If y'all haven't met him, he's a great guy. Yeah, good people. So I'll be on there Monday talking with them. Great show. If y'all haven't watched that, definitely check some of their shows out and binge watch them. They've had, they've been around a while, hundreds of episodes, and they've had some very interesting people on there. They do interview, bringing people do interview format and talk. And I think Sean's wanting to get into a little bit more education and stuff. For those that don't know, he was on Master Distiller and won an episode of Master Distiller. I think it's vodka or something that he was doing. So, he's a great guy, and I think he's maybe going to do some education things. And I don't know if he's going to do classes and all that to pay. And I think he's starting maybe something like that. But yeah, they're all good people. So it should be a lot of fun. But tune in for that on Monday if you can't. I'll see y'all on Wednesday, same time, same bat channel. Peace out. Love y'all, and see you Monday or Wednesday. Shine on, y'all.